TitleMatchNetwork.com.
I'm Muraco, the original Rock. We'll talk about that later on in the interview. I guess my first question to you, you've been actually everywhere. You've been in Georgia, California, AWA, the World Wrestling Federation, of course, and even ECW. And I'm sure I'm missing a lot of other places that you've been to. But thanks, first of all, for having us here in Hawaii at your home.
My pleasure. Great. It was an honor to be
Cool.
considered with all the tapes you sent me, Dusty, Watts, and Abdullah.
I definitely want to ask you, I guess our first question is how you got started in the business.
Oh, God. Actually, I got started in the business just, when I was a little kid, just watching. They used to have the old Chicago tapes. Russ Pappy Davis and Hans Schmidt, Vern Gagne, Rocca, the old Chicago territory. Then Ed Francis started around here. Al Karasik was the original promoter here. And he sold it to Ed Francis, who kind of brought it into modern day. And look, Telly Bleers was his partner. He was more my mentor. And his son was 1972 World Surfing Champion.
You were living here then at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born and raised here. Grew up here. So his son and I used to hang out, went to school together in Honolulu. And so we, I was an amateur wrestler, football player and stuff. And I'm a big fan of the wrestling. And they used to have a great show over here. It was like the WWF is now without the pyrotechnics and the women and the girls and everything. It was just pretty much along the same line. Johnny Moran was getting out of caskets and, guys were doing,
Right.
It was like, 50 years ahead of his time. So that's what really, being a fan,
right.
is just how I got into wrestling, and got started just the programming and stuff. And I was an amateur wrestler in high school and stuff.
I was going to ask you, what is your athletic background?
Yeah, football player, amateur wrestler, served.
So you knew you basically wanted to get into the business?
Yeah, well, kind of. I wanted to play ball, but I didn't want to go to school.
Right.
So
you just wanted to serve yourself.
Yeah, it's kind of just didn't mix, and didn't have hardship and stuff like that for pros and stuff.
Right.
In those days. So I came back home. I was working construction and stuff, and so Lord Bleer sent me to Vancouver, British Columbia, and that's when G. Kaniski and Sandra Kovacs were promoting it, and so that's how I got started. He sent me out for about 6 months. I was up there for about 6 months. Everywhere I went, territory by territory, everything was just a real, tremendous learning experience and stuff. Back in those days, especially.
Who are some of the veterans that really helped you out?
Well, when I started there was an old guy, Bud Rattel. He just died about a year or so ago, but he really helped me out. But then the top guys around there were Mark Lewin was just finishing up,
right,
and heading back to Australia. Dean Ho, who was Dean Higuchi from here, he used to have a gym in Waikiki, and he was up there. Guy John Quinn, Bulldog Bob Brown, naturally Knitsky, Eric Froelich, some of these other, a lot of guys, you don't really hear.
Right.
Old Cowboy Jack Betts, he died several years ago, but he used to wrestle around Europe, and he wrestled. He was wrestling in Minneapolis when he was around 60 when I first went there, and he was like an old timer. So that was kind of like that Vancouver territory was my first start, and I work in Portland too.
Don Owens.
Yeah, I asked because they'd give me some free time or something, and I bought a VW Bug, so it was like a 300-mile trip. So I'd go to Don Owens and work down there, and Beauregard had been here come from Hawaii here, and Harry Fujiwara was in that area at the time, and down there they had guys Lonnie Main, Dutch Savage, Tom Andrews, the Claw,
right,
was over there.
How old were you around?
I was 20.
Okay.
I started when I was 20, 1970.
Okay.
When I first got into business.
I guess I guess basically Portland was basically, and Vancouver were the first territories that you worked?
Yeah, I started in Vancouver, but the first night I went down, they sent me down to Portland TV.
Right.
So they just give you $25 trans and $75 to be on TV. And that was, yeah. So that was back those days, that was a pretty good payoff though. You get the $25 for the trans and the $75, you know.
Right.
So that was.
Where did you go from Portland?
Well, Vancouver was basically, Sander Kovacs was pretty much, he thought he wanted to be in control of my bookings and stuff. But I kind of, ran short, and they weren't using me that much there. So I went down to L.A. My folks were living in L.A. at the time, and I went to Los Angeles. And so I called Mike LaBelle,
right,
and Charlie Moto was doing the booking for Mike LaBelle. That's when the big Tolis Blassie angle, when I guess Blassie got blinded or
right,
something. Is that what happened?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it was Blassie got blinded and stuff. So I went down there, and I always had a lot of help. I was pretty close to a lot of. So I was a decent worker, and they needed somebody to put Tolis over on TV going into that show. So I was a young, good-looking kid, in great shape and stuff. So I went and I worked with him, and did a hell of a job for him. He looked like he was beating somebody, at the time, a new face and stuff like that. And I could work a little bit, just a little bit.
You were a babyface back then.
Yeah.
And then also you worked with Moondog Maine out there.
Yeah, no, I worked with Moondog Maine over here in Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's so I worked in LA for a couple months. They called me back. They said, well, we'll use you down here. And until I got a couple of those $25 payouts from the Olympic Auditorium, I was going, oh, I don't know. So, and then I came over here to Hawaii,
right,
to kind of for a Christmas vacation, get away and do some surfing and stuff. So I came back home, after I've been around LA. I've been around John Tolis a little bit. Rick Drayson was there. Blassie used to live in the apartment building that my mom and dad rented.
Right.
So he was a tenant over there all the time. He was out on the roof sunbathing.
Cool.
Blassie was a classic. So I called up back here if I could get booked, for Christmas, pay for the trip.
Right.
I was still 20, 21 years old. So I came over and he said, yeah, I was I had a background name from wrestling and sports and surfing and, state champion and all-state in football and stuff like that. So it was kind of it had only been gone out of high school maybe a year and a half or so. So it was kind of a novelty. Bill Francis, Russ Francis, the football player,
right,
his older brother had started wrestling in here with the father. And the father actually sent him to Portland. He was in Portland when I was there too. So I came back and, had still even got a little more polished as a worker. Back in those days, you're kind of either natural or, or it took a long time. You didn't have the luxury of all the schools and the learning facilities.
You had to learn as you went on.
Yeah, you just had, the guys, the guys you worked with, I guess, they would teach you and, that you would learn from them.
Right.
So I came back here and I guess they were running a battle royal or something that night. And so they booked me with Courtesy Alkea, who'd been the top heel here for, top heel all over the world for years, So we went, we split falls. He got counted out,
right,
and something else. And, the people went, they couldn't believe I got my hand raised. It was a simple count out and stuff, but, he put me over like $1 million, it made me look fancy, So they said, well, God, can you stay and work for a while? So that I stayed, sure. I was living in Waikiki for like $150 a month, living right on the beach, and I was right in the Vietnam era, and people were coming back and forth. It was just a great time. It was the decline of the Hawaii wrestling,
right?
Though which they used to do such fantastic business over here with such a small population that they had. So I got back here, and then. Again, the people I were working with, they're like Johnny Baran, Maurice Vachon came through, Ripper Collins, naturally Courtesy Alkea was here, Moondog Maine, Rocky Montero, Sam Steamboat was back home, Billy Robinson, who was like a teacher. He was like a teacher to me,
right,
during that period of time. I spent a lot of time working out in the ring with him, and working on just working on the mat work and stuff, different techniques and stuff that that he had to offer, since he'd wrestled all over the world, shooting and, working and everything else, So but Lord Blair was overseeing everything at the time. So Vern Gagne came here with his family for the summer or something for vacation.
Right.
And the Lord said, hey, there's this young kid I want you to see.
You were 23, I think, around this time.
Yeah. 21, 22, 23. Probably around. Yeah. Maybe, not older. I think, I was about 22 by the time I got to Minneapolis. So he said, I was a young kid I want you to see. So he put me on with Fuji. We did 20-minute Broadway. Those days, Fuji was young too.
Right.
Fuji was just a kid himself, much more. Well, he was older than me. But, they're taking slams off the top and, over the top and all kinds, we're flying all over the place. So, and little did I know, Jim Barnett wanted me in Australia too, at the same time for $800 a week.
Right.
With Australia, which in those days was, we're talking about 1971. Which was, pretty good money back then. But, I guess Blizz didn't want me to go on with Barnett, so he and Curtis. He didn't trust Curtis. It was, Curtis and Lewin.
Right.
But he steered me in the direction of Minneapolis, and after that was kind of like the start of my
American.
Yeah, that was my big break into.
What was Vern like as a promoter back in those days?
Oh, he was pretty ruthless. Yeah. He was, he controlled, he wanted control of the wrestler in the matches, and, he wanted, him and Larry Hennig would go at it. But he ran a great territory.
Right. You and Jimmy Snuka were a team back then.
Yeah.
On AWA.
Yeah, that was the second year I was there.
Now, you guys were being pushed a lot, and you guys were going over all the time, I guess, on Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwickel and stuff like that. And even Rhodes and Murdoch you guys were working with.
Yeah.
What are your memories of some of those matches?
Oh, they were unreal. Snuka had a real, great charisma as a babyface.
What happened to that push? Did something happen?
Oh, we just hated living there. We just we were from here. We were from Hawaii, and lived all our life in Hawaii, and hadn't gotten too far from, really strayed too far from here, and God, Minneapolis was just torture.
Too cold.
Yeah, we were making, we were both making a fortune. We were making big, at that, comparatively, actually to anybody in the country, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000 a week. I can't remember at the time.
You just got fed up with it.
But it was just, the living, we're young, and it was just miserable.
Right.
It was a great learning experience. They had the best talent that.
You were teaming with Saito too, I think.
No, he came in after.
After, okay.
I was with Saito in San Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah, but they had Backlund and Stevens, like you say, Larry Hennig, Lars Anderson, Ivan Koloff, Stan Kowalski. Those are just some of the heels.
Was there ever an incident with you and Vern, or something happened with Snuka or something like that? Somebody told me that you guys were getting pushed to the moon, and then something happened with you and the promotion that I don't know exactly what happened.
I just wanted to go. I just couldn't take it.
Okay.
I just, they never, he booked me for a TV shot with him on TV and pulled me out of Milwaukee or something. I never showed up. That was as far, there was never any
incidents.
Yeah, never any harsh words or never any, actually that period there was a real great living. Rhodes came in.
Right.
Dusty Rhodes came in as a heel afterwards. He'd just come back. In fact, I was there for 8 or 10 months, and they sent me to Japan for 1 week. I went to Japan. It was with the third promotion. It wasn't Baba and it wasn't Inoki. I think it was at
JWA.
I don't know. Kobayashi was the champion.
Oh, you know.
I know what it is. Yeah, it's I forget.
Komatsu.
I forget what it's called.
I don't know. It was like one of the. It was like the
IWE or something.
Yeah, I could have been. It was one of the first. It was like the first opposition group that they.
It's like No Mascaris over there.
I guess.
Middle 70s.
I was Kobayashi and anyway, Rhodes and I were there.
Russia Kimura.
Yeah, that's where I met Dusty on that trip.
What's he like?
In Japan?
Yeah, I mean.
Well, neither of us cared for it too much the first time.
Huh.
But, we were times it was a pretty far out, it was a far out group because Vern was sending guys that, they needed bodies, So he sent some K.O. Yates.
Right.
I don't know. He was a landscaper. No, that was Kenny J. He was something. He was like an ex-boxer from Minneapolis. And they wanted him to do a job one night for some guy in boxing, and he didn't want to do it, so they beat the hell out of him. He was punch drunk. He was just goofy. And Billy Red Cloud was there and on that trip, and it was the Hollywood Blondes, original Hollywood Blondes,
right?
Buddy Roberts and Jerry Brown. Yeah, they were on the tour.
How did you wind up in Georgia?
Well, for Minneapolis, I was in Minneapolis almost 2 years. And then from there I went to San Francisco.
Right.
And stayed in San Francisco for a little while. That's where I tore my shoulder in San Francisco when I first got there. It was 2-3 months after I did the territory. So then I kind of worked back into it, and then. I was getting ready to leave, I was for Roy Shires
right
at the time, and Pat Patterson was the booker. And nothing was going on too much over there. So Bill Watts was booking in Florida. So I got a call from Watts, and he needed talent. He was starting his own, he wanted his own group to run in Florida, put together in Florida. So I was still babyface at the time.
Somebody told me you're like going to be the next Jack Briscoe. They're pushing you pretty hard down there.
Yeah. They, I was. It was, they just had, the thing with that there too. They had just fantastic talent. Young guys who were just, it was like a real enlightenment. After going through, the older, more experienced guys from AWA with Bockwinkel and Stevens. Stevens is probably my, all-time favorite worker, and then I went to San Francisco with Patterson and Shires with him. Everything was kind of like a building, just all building blocks put together. With Shires would, you right from the match, you'd sit down. I want you guys to tag match on, 4 to 6, 4 to 7 high spots in it together. It's a single match. I want 3-5 high spots. You guys, get it together, get going. I want that, the timing. I want you to work out everything in your interview and everything else.
Right.
And then I went to Florida, and then they had so much great young talent at the time.
I think you did some stuff, Barry Windham down there.
Well, that was after a while. Right. That was after, when I first went into Babyface. They were about 8 months, 10 months. At first, and that's when Dusty turned.
Right.
And we had a phenomenal crew. Dick Slater was just a fantastic worker. Before he got in accidents and stuff. He was easily one of the best young guys around. The Briscoes and just a crew of people. Bob Armstrong.
Right.
All the baby faces. Joe LeDuc was there. He was just turning babyface. He was just leaving from earlier, from before. Charlie lay at the front there, at the front desk. But that was when Pac Song, who the heels, like Pac Song and Gary Hart was the manager. Mongolian Stomper, Archie Gold. They had
JJ Dillon down there at the time, or was that
no, not yet.
Okay, that was later.
Yeah.
What was Florida like as far as like the travel schedule?
Unreal.
Yeah.
Unreal was, it was easy. Everything was like Monday. When I first got there, I think like Monday would be Orlando. No, wrong. Monday was West Palm.
Right.
And Tuesday was Tampa. Wednesday you'd have TV in Miami. But already they were using the plane. You're flying to Miami.
Right.
And Thursday originally was Jacksonville. And then Friday was Tallahassee or Fort Lauderdale. They split it up.
So it's back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah, but it was, they're only like 200 miles.
Yeah.
I think the longest trip was Miami. It was like 300 miles.
Right.
It wasn't too bad.
Where did you go after Florida?
Florida, I went back to when I was babyface there, back and forth a couple times. I went to Georgia for a while. Well, I was in and out of Georgia. Actually, I was like Andre's partner and stuff. I used to tag up with Andre the Giant and stuff.
What was he like?
Oh, he was great. He was a good guy. We were good friends at the beginning. That's where we started that finish. In fact, it was with Dusty Rhodes and Ole Anderson. I don't know what happened to all the old Florida tapes. I think Jerry Briscoe.
Mike Graham has them all.
Oh, he has them all? But we started that finish. I was only about 235 at the time, 230. So they could do it. But we were with Ole and Dusty. Dusty was just before Dusty turned babyface. And, bang, 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 something, Andre chasing somebody on the floor. He ended up on the floor. Ole took me, threw me over the top rope to where Andre was. Andre was on the ground, caught me on the ground, pressed me, and threw me back over the top rope. I cross-body blocked Ole Anderson, pinned the 1, 2, 3. That was, that was the start. So after that, they got, that tape went around a lot of places. So they used to fly me in, Andre's partner and stuff all over the place. So that was pretty cool. I go give the big sell, and then here comes, the tag, and here comes the Giant. So it was easy to get sympathy. I had long hair, and I was young. I had a mustache those days. So yeah, but I went there. Yeah, I went from Florida, from babyface, I went to Texas.
Right.
For
Fritz? Or?
Fritz, yeah.
What was that like?
So that was madness. It was. I just got divorced. It was it wasn't all their fault. I kind of came stormtrooping in. I think they had plans for Al Madrill as their baby face, and they used me. But I wasn't making that kind of money, and just got divorced. And me and Doug Gilbert were living together, and Scott Casey, and it was Angelo Mosco was around the territory at the time. Right. So we had a good time together. Jack Lanza was in from Vern, Minneapolis, and Indianapolis. He'd come in as a top heel and work top shows for him.
Was Fritz pretty strict as a promoter? Or
not really.
Was he easy to work for?
He was easy to work for. Just never,
How old were his kids?
No money. The kids weren't in the business yet. No. What's your name? The black kid, Sweet Brown Sugar. Skip Thomas.
Skip Young.
Skip Young. He was training back then.
Right.
He was in the beginning of. He'd work out in the ring and stuff.
That was it.
Yeah.
After that, where did you go from there?
Back to Georgia.
What was Ole Anderson like as a booker?
He was a good booker. Miserable guy.
Right.
Miserable personality, but he's a good booker. He ran a good ship. Ideas. Always he was on top of everything. He was efficient. Jim Barnett really liked him as a booker.
Right. What was the atmosphere like in the locker room?
Oh, it was always pretty good. Yeah, I don't think too many places I don't know. It's not like it is now. When I was in Minneapolis, that's when Robinson and I used to train the guys out at the barn. That's where we trained Flair and the Iron Sheik, Ken Patera, Greg Gagne, Jim Brunzell, and a guy named Jimmy Bruggers. All 6 of them were in that one class.
Did you see Flair as a guy who's definitely going to make it in the business? Or
he loved the business. I remember you sent me the tape about from Dusty and Dustus Dingus McRhodes or something.
Yeah.
He wanted to go ask. Yeah, he was. That's true. That's all true. He used to run the Minneapolis airport and pick them up. Pick up Rhodes and Murdoch. He was, started. In fact, I had the first match with him where I turned. I was an established babyface, in Minneapolis. I'd done a big angle with Ivan Koloff. In fact, getting Ivan ready for Vern and stuff, And so I was pretty, and nobody knew Ric Flair.
Right.
He was from there, but he just, he was just green.
Right.
Hadn't started. So I kind of have the first heel match he ever had. I laid back a little bit and let him, throw a couple chops and stuff into me, and I sold them, and then I made a comeback, and he was stoked. I think it was somewhere in St. Paul,
Right.
that we worked. Not the St. Paul, but it was a spot show outside of St. Paul. It was kind of funny. There was a lot of stuff around that old Minneapolis area that was pretty insane.
As far as Tommy Rich, when he was in the territory in Georgia, do you think he was overpushed, or do you think he was rightfully pushed? He was pushed heavy for a little bit there.
He was pushed heavy.
Yeah.
He was a good worker.
Right.
Good talker, good worker, charismatic. Girls loved him. Kids loved him. It's a judgment call. I think a lot of these things are all judgment calls. Depending on the promoter who wants to do it,
Right.
Who's the booker, who's liking him, who doesn't like the guy. All the derogatory things you could probably say about Tommy. You could probably say a lot of good things about him too. Because at the time, when I remember him, he worked like hell. He worked hard as hell.
What is your take on why they gave him the belt for like the 3 days or something? It was
those things was political at the
Right.
time. I was even going to get it for a time.
Right.
Until I got drunk and wasted at Dusty Rhodes' Rock and Roll Revival. I was pounding on a speaker. That was my first trip in Tampa. That was my wife, and at the time, and Jerry Briscoe and his wife were all there. The story was that Eddie Graham was sitting way in the back where all the boys, kind of where the locker room is,
Right.
up at Fort Esterly used to be at the Tampa. And I guess somebody was sitting there and goes, "Oh, Muraco's really gone." And Eddie Graham with that one eye goes, "He sure is." It wasn't too long after that I was headed toward Texas.
As far as your interview style and stuff like that, you did probably, without a doubt, some of the best heel promos in the business. And how did you develop your interview skills?
Oh God, the background I had just was phenomenal. The people I grew up listening to, Curtis Iaukea,
Right.
Ripper Collins, Iaukea is what they call him in the mainland. Is Iaukea is how you pronounce it in Hawaii.
Right.
Ripper Collins, Johnny Baran. Those guys in those days, Ed Francis's shows were so insane, and those guys. Curtis would start the program with his back to the camera. He was like 450 pounds at the time,
Right.
And he would, and he'd have the crescendos and the pianissimos. He would take it from high to low, and then Johnny Bryan was doing his psycho thing, and then Ripper Collins would come out with his Hawaiian, the Maui and Kauai and Hilo, and he just got under the skin of the Hawaiian people like no other heel had ever done it. And their timing and their just the influence I have, and then I was around Dusty,
Right.
and Dusty was,
Hell of a promo.
yeah, Dusty was a hell of a promo guy too, and the people I was around, everybody, Larry Henning, and people forget, they don't think because he was kind of, but back in those days, what you don't understand, you got to see, back in those days, the guys used to help each other.
Right.
It wasn't like,
That's
wasn't.
what British Beefcake was just telling us that it's not cutthroat like it is today.
It wasn't like it was, Guys would stand out there, watch your match, come back, and you should have done that. You're kind of rushing. There's like the big point in my career back to Minneapolis again, where I learned, since we're doing a lot of time on this
Right.
anyway. I'll jump around. I'll go back for you.
Definitely.
But I was in Minneapolis. I've been in Minneapolis. In fact, I've been in Minneapolis. Then they sent me with Vern to Japan, the Japan trip I told you about, where I met Dusty and stuff.
Right.
And I was it was just before the angle, where I was, or maybe in the middle of the angle where I worked with Koloff. And then I come back and I don't know, we're in Sioux Falls, South Dakota one night. The place was packed, about 10,000 people. The TV was hot, and I was working with Ray Stevens, in my opinion, one of the greatest of all time. And it just didn't go right, and I realized that maybe I just wasn't selling where I was able to get over that hump. And once I was able to, I was able to sell as a babyface and get the sympathy and stuff, and then everything else, But back in those days, guys used to work with each other. Hey, you saw this, you should have done that. You could have waited, your timing and so guys were always analyzing and tearing apart your stuff.
Right.
So you're even with your interviews and stuff, I'm sure a lot of it was subliminal with Curtis and Hanson John and Ripper, And it was just, a lot of stuff that, I remembered and came back.
Right.
Because later on in Florida, at my heel years, we haven't gotten to yet, but then Curtis came in and we were all together under, like a family type
The whole
thing.
thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, what are your memories of, I don't know what year this was. It was definitely like early 80s with Gordon Solie and Roddy Piper. The angle that you guys did.
Oh, that was early 80s. Yeah, that was.
83, 82 maybe.
Yeah, that was.
Actually, maybe 82, 81.
Yeah, I was already working for Vince then.
Right.
I think.
No, this is before you went to the Titan. It was the angle you did with Gordon Solie and Roddy.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, where I was.
Right. You went after Gordon a little bit, and then Piper turned babyface.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. And we did good business. I think.
You left right after that, and then they brought Lawler in to feud with Piper, and then Piper quit the territory. So
yeah,
the feud turned
I went to
into
North
Lawler.
Carolina. I think I'd already spent 6 months in New York.
Okay.
With Vince by then.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure it was already part of the, part of the thing there.
Right.
Because there was a time there I went after Vince. I went to Charlotte too for Jimmy Crockett, and I was working Charlotte, Atlanta. They're supposed to give Wahoo and I the belts and stuff, but
Mid-Atlantic territory.
yeah.
What was Roddy Piper like back in those days?
I know Roddy from Texas. When he drove in, busted up old car in a pit bull, and he and I have been great friends throughout our career.
Right.
He was the same guy then as he is now in the essence that he's driven. Really driven to, I get an old TV at home, we can bring it down to the studio and break it, he coming always with ideas and what's happening. And in New York, it was a great competition to have him on the same,
right,
at the same time. Never to, never make two interviews the same. Or never, that was in the early period,
right,
before it got, where you got so repetitious that it just killed you.
Do you remember the promo? I don't know if you know this, but it's definitely like a cult following. Has a cult following. The interview you guys did for Entertainment Tonight. It was you and Roddy.
Oh yeah.
So, I got to get you a copy of that.
Yeah, I remember. I vaguely remember that.
You're talking about the guys sitting back in their couches drinking beer.
Yeah.
Wishing they could be you. So.
Yeah.
So, what are your memories of working George Animal Steel, when he came to Georgia for that little brief time? It might have been like a one-shot deal. Ollie brought him in. Or no, Dusty might have brought him. Tommy Rich brought him in.
Well, I don't think I worked with George.
You don't?
I worked with Abby.
Was that with Piper or was that separate?
No, Piper and I didn't do a lot in Georgia together. Just that one angle.
Right.
Never. See, I was in Georgia before. See, I was in Georgia coming out of Florida. They used to bring me up for Omni shows and weekend and the Saturday when it was the old Atlanta Civic Center, or the big auditorium downtown,
right,
in Atlanta before the Omni. Yeah, and then after I left Fritz in Texas, I came back to Georgia, and Piper was still in Texas,
right,
and he wasn't. I was there. That's when I was. Ricky Gibson and Jerry Lawler, and those guys, Abdullah.
Right.
That's when I, with Abby and those guys around there.
What are your memories of working with Abby?
Abby was easy. He was a piece of cake.
Right.
He's, you got to work to his style. You're not going to be doing,
right.
You put over his stuff and he'll be there when you come back.
Right.
Yeah, you just but you got to work to his. You got to work his style, which is no problem.
Pretty much a brawl.
Yeah, back in those days it wasn't hard. You just sell. I think we had a big match on like match of the year or something. The dream match or something. When we had a match on the Saturday morning Atlanta TV that they had, and we went about 15-20 minutes nonstop. And they kept that as like a classic or something,
right?
Because you were on TV, so I couldn't slow down and really sell for him, and he realized that, So as it worked out, we were working together, and so it turned out, about 15 minutes of just, we were moving. He was moving. I was young and skinny at the time anyway, so I had no problem moving those days.
When did you went back to Florida? What year was that?
God, I used to go back and forth between San Francisco and Florida.
Right.
I went to, I was still a babyface when I did that angle with Koloff, where I did the blood, from I bit the rubber and I had all the, the blood, and they carried me out and I went to Japan for a couple of weeks.
Right.
Did the interview, I was cracking and crying, all that stuff. And then me and Ivan went for a while. Then I left and.
Was Ivan a good teacher? From what I understand, really.
He was great. He was great when he first came to Minneapolis after he dropped he dropped the strap to Pedro. He took and he was but then he was just young and dumb, didn't know anything, but he was like 300 pounds and had so much energy and so much motion,
right.
And his timing, and we just worked so well together. The first angle we worked together in Minneapolis, and then we worked another angle in Florida there when I was still a babyface.
Right.
And that's where a lot of guys, Keith Franks, Adrian Adonis, and a lot of guys said that was even better cage match than the Snuka. Because I remember we trusted each other so much. At the time I was like doing a handstand on the top of the cage. He's trying to throw me onto the floor. I kind of worked my way back down. I cross body block him, and he falls from the top rope backwards. Bumps like that back then, the stuff that they're doing now. That we were doing. God, this is in the late 70s.
Right.
Mid 70s, probably 74. That would have to be about 74, maybe 76. And then after 76, I used to go back off. I worked Florida, Australia, and San Francisco. Because I could surf in Australia and San Francisco. so I ended up. Finally went back to Frisco, and I told Shars I want to be a heel.
Right.
And that's how I said because Shars was probably the most miserable person, but just a great teacher.
Right.
He was just a fantastic teacher. So I wanted to learn my craft as a heel. There were different territories I wanted to go to, to fully, develop into them, So I wanted to be a heel, but I wanted to be a good heel.
Right.
So I went to Shar. Pat was still there. He was his baby face. So I forget how I switched or just switched, and then Mr. Cockman, me and Patterson were supposed to be an hour Broadway, but he blew up in 56 minutes. And he put the figure forward, and then we came out with that match, all the falls after an hour. We started that match, and stuff like that. But that's when I, turned. So, because Shars he would have you consciously organize the match ahead of time. Then you would go, when you're doing we used to do the TV in Sacramento, you'd go and do this you'd have like a 5-minute promo.
Right.
You're doing it. Well, I want you to, cover this as 2 out of 3 falls, and cover this no disqualification, and make sure you touch that you and him did this, this happened earlier between that. And I would actually sit there and take notes.
Right.
At the time. It was a fairly academic background, so at the notes and everything, and I would put together an outline, and then I would go, and Hank Renner was the thing, and that's where I started my heel interview. The babyface interview was pretty much, you kind of, yes sir, no sir, I love you, you're
right,
I love the flag, I love my kids, and this, I'm going to try my best,
right,
or and then, but then you build it up after a while, like Wahoo and those guys do, which actually today isn't, but those are, that was back in the past when the baby faces, in those days before. Now there are no baby faces or heels nowadays, but Shars would set that whole pattern. So I spent quite maybe a year there. I used to live in Santa Cruz, so I'd have to drive an extra 30, 40 miles.
You had an awesome match, I guess, with Pat Patterson in California. I think it was like an Ironman match at the time. where you guys did the finish outside the ring where I think you were outside the ring first and the ref counted you out, but you had, I think, Patterson in a figure four and he submitted, but you were still counted out because you were already outside the ring at first.
Oh, yeah.
And then he was still stretchered out and you got back in the ring, but he won the match or something like that. Yeah. Well, I understand it was like an awesome match.
It was a good crew to work with. You know, there was a lot of good guys. After I turned heel there, that's when I went back to Florida as a heel.
How much of your gimmick reflected the real Don Muraco?
God, I don't know how much is anybody's reflected. You know,
right?
There's a lot of things I'd like to be in there.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of. I guess I don't know. Maybe 150%.
Right. Actually, down in Florida, when you went back, you were with Kevin Sullivan and you did the cult thing, sort of. And Kevin, I don't know if he did the devil worshiping gimmick at that time.
No, Kevin didn't come in until after I was there.
Yeah, it was way after.
When I first went back there,
you did something with Barry Windham.
That was after a while too.
Right.
But when I first went back, that's when Eddie used to bring all these. Eddie Graham was another, you know. I know Dusty talked about it, and Watts talked about it. So I watched their tapes. But Eddie Graham was, you know, he was a master, as you know, as far as really master, because he could relate to people and stuff, unlike Roy.
Right.
You know, and he had the wrestling, and he had the, you know, he had so. But I went back and, but Eddie, knowing that he was a man, he would love to bring in these big, you know, former superstars, you know, former guys that had been his peers in his time, like Valentine and Watts and everything else, and give them the book and let them hang, you know, give them enough rope and watch them hang themselves, you know, and then he would come and save the day. That was, but at that time, when I came back that time, Watts was gone and Louis Tolet had been booked and bunch of guys have been booked, but at that time when I had Buddy Rogers, VR was the booker.
Right.
Had been made the booker, and that whole experience of meeting him and getting to know him and getting and watching Eddie set him up to fire him and stuff, you know. But that whole being around BR and that was the first time I met Buddy and stuff, you know, and. He was the booker in there, and that's when I became Magnificent M.
Right.
The Magnificent One. That was Eddie Graham and Buddy Rogers. Yeah, they created that. So I'd been there so long, in and out of Florida so long as babyface and Jack Briscoe this and Jack Briscoe that and Jack Briscoe, you know, and I was good friends with the Briscoes, Jack and Jerry both.
Right.
And you know, so they were trying to figure, and they knew I had success as a heel. And you know, I was a decent worker, and they thought I could do money. The first night Eddie put me over, they put a hood on me. But, you know, like everybody knew, you know, he had the scar on the shoulder, and the stretch marks. You know, and everybody, you know, they knew who it was. So there wasn't. It was a great angle. It was one of the best angles I've ever been involved with. So what happened? I had the mask on a couple nights, you know. And the next day, I beat Eddie Graham right in the middle with that Asiatic spike that they made up, you know.
Right.
So Eddie did the job, you know, in a 6-man tag. Eddie did the job for me. I just put him out the night before, and they taped it for Tampa TV and everything. So the next day on TV, same stuff. I'm going around, you know, bang bang this. So they let it go a week. I was still, you know, just a Magnificent M. Right. And so Steve Kern came on, and he did a shooting interview, like a half shooter. What do you mean? You know, that's Don Muraco. That's no Magnificent M. Huh. You know, like exposing me. Right. You know, like everybody knows who the master. You know, Dick Byers was Dr. X, but nobody ever, you know, nobody ever came out and said, "Hey, you know, I was talking to Dick Byers," or I mean, Dr. X. You know, huh. You know, and said, you know, but. He you know, was kind of like unprofessional, you know, right. And the whole audience, the whole crowd. But the night before, I'd shaved my head. I'd look, you know, they had the hair like Briscoe and everything, like, you know. So, but the night before, Mike Graham had shaved my head, you know, I was just clean white, you know. So I went out. I was outraged at Kern. I went out there and we got into a brawl, and then they sent the guys to clear the ring, and then as they're clearing the ring, he grabbed the whole of the mask, and as they pulled him off, they pulled out, out I came with a bald head. And you could have heard a pin drop. It was so crazy, they just, and they couldn't understand that I was bald and I was a heel. And,
right.
Because before that, I just had that match with Koloff the time before, and he the blood and everything out of my throat. And then the time I pinned Dusty for Jack Briscoe.
Right.
Probably the only time I ever pinned Dusty too. The Harley Race, all those guys. So they, I was really established as a babyface. You could have heard a pin drop for a good 10 seconds, and then all of a sudden they exploded, and then they just went crazy. And then Sonny King was kind of like the head of the cult thing there, or the group that they had, and he was having a falling out, or it wasn't working with him for the office before he went to Charlotte and got stabbed and stuff. And somehow it just turned around, and they brought in Curtis. Had come from didn't work. New Zealand hadn't worked out or something.
Right.
And we were in New Zealand together before that, and Curtis was down there. Killer Khan, Joe LeDuc. We just had Scott Irwin, Bad Leroy. Just an insane group. Heels.
Right.
It's an excellent group, and like Killer Carl Cox has already turned babyface. It was him and Jimmy Garvin were holding the territory because Dusty had gone out for a while, and they'd held it together real well. And then we came back in with that group of heels, and then Dusty saw what was going on. So naturally, he couldn't wait to come down and beat everybody. So he came back. So I was a Jacksonville boy. And Curtis used to work with him in Miami. And everybody, all around.
Right. How do you think Dusty was so much power back in the day?
Back in those guys, the guys used to manipulate. He had, first place, he was a great talent.
Right.
You go these guys. You go. The bottom line. That they had the talent and everything. He was driven to be. The American dream. He was driven. He wanted so much in his heart to be. A star.
Right.
To be. Be that type of. Just be on Johnny Carson and be that. And that. He was like 20 years ahead of his time. His desire, his wants and stuff. Like the way these guys, Austin and The Rock and stuff, are on Carson and all these guys now. That's that was really what he saw. And aside from having all the talent, and working so hard,
right?
Because he used to work. He was never in great shape or anything, but in the ring, he would work. He'd work his ass off.
What were your initial impressions of Vince McMahon Sr. when you first went there?
Oh, Vince McMahon Sr. guy. He was real laid back, low key. Everything was set up in his book. The territory was arranged so meticulously at that time that you come in. I was one of the few heels that didn't have that opportunity, which lucky. But you'd come in, you'd have your 6, 8, 10 weeks on TV, just squashing guys. And then if you're the top heel, you'd open up with the champion at Madison Square Garden for, 2 or 3 shots or however, they had you figured in at the time. And then you'd go Pittsburgh, Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, all just around that area. So you're hitting 3 main events with the champ. Then you'd come out with an angle with somebody else, maybe like Slaughter Patterson, or you come out with the Intercontinental Champion,
right.
Snuka or something. You come out with somebody else, and then you'd have another double main event, and then before you know it, you're on top for 6 months, and your time's over. You're leaving there with 150, 200 grand, which is in those days was phenomenal money. That's a 6 month period of time. So the old man was so meticulous and so easy that he didn't really have to be an asshole to anybody, or didn't really have to really didn't have to show his power, or didn't have to he was so laid. He'd stand in the Square Garden and play with his quarters. As I was having a roll of quarters.
Somebody else told us that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could have been Dusty. I don't remember. Somebody told us that.
Yeah, Matt, New York guy.
Right.
Guy was in New York for a long time. But he would just stare, he was a gentleman, high, class guy.
Right.
Class act, after TVs, they'd have a big dinner over at some place, you know, or Lou Albano would go and order 3 lobsters and rip the lobster tail off there, sit there drinking a bottle of vodka, eating lobster in one hand, and just dunking the lobster tail and stuff, you know. Motherfucking Irish bastard. Fuck the old man. He'd get fired every Wednesday.
Somebody else over there.
Every Wednesday, fucking Lou Albano would get fired. Or not every Wednesday, every third Wednesday after Allentown TV.
Right.
Allentown was Tuesday. Allentown TV was Tuesday night. So every third Wednesday, Lou would get fired, and he'd come in all hungover, and Thursday, you know, Wednesday to Hamburg, you know, he'd get his job back, and you know, he'd be drunk again. It was great. He'd keep, you know, it'd be like 16 cups. One would be all vodka, one's half vodka, quarter vodka, all water, all something. Every once in a while you pick up a cup and you think it's water, and you just drink and you get a full cup of vodka, you know.
That's great.
But Lou Albano, he was a classic.
We're going to talk about him more later, I guess. But what was Vince McMahon Jr.'s involvement when you first got in?
He was the announcer, as far as I know. I'm sure he did a lot. I'm sure he had a lot to do with the programming, because Patterson was in there.
Right.
And was semi-working, you know, he's kind of around the office and stuff. So, but he was unreal. Vince Jr. was unreal. He had the thing in his ear, and he would run, you know, 100, 200 interviews just out of that. They just have the papers drawn up. Okay, main event, this guy. He'd stand there all day with the coat and the mic.
Right.
Boom, 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 back and forth. This guy coming, this guy coming, this guy. We're going to San Diego. We're going to Baltimore. We're going to Minot, North Dakota, wherever it happened to be. And he would, you know, he'd have it all down. Or, you know, he'd just be there with the mic, and, you know, he'd be your whipping boy.
Right.
For, you know.
Now, when you did a lot of promos, I guess they put you with Grand Wizard. Did you like having a manager at the time?
Yeah. I had nothing, you know. He didn't do a lot. He didn't do anything in the ring, so it was no problem, you know. And Ernie at the time, he would do everything for you. In fact, he was my daughter's godfather. So, but his only job, the Wizard's only job, would be to get his man over.
Right.
He never cared. Well, you know, he took care of the books and everything for the old man in Florida, and he had his niche in the office. He wasn't competing with Blassie and Albano for other manager spots or to get a working job, you know, to do, you know, get in a tag team or anything. His only job, he had one job, that was to get his guy over. Valentine, myself, Superstar, whoever he happened to have at the time, and everything would be focused at you. So, you know, Ernie Roth was easy. He was easy to do.
What was it like the first time you headlined MSG and you were challenging for the WWF title?
Anytime I went in the Garden. Most of the times I was headlined, but the first time I went to Madison Square Garden wasn't for the title. I was one of the guys that did it different. The first guy to do it different. And there I went in and I worked with Martel.
Right.
Rick Martel. Then I came back and I worked 2 or 3 shows with Pedro for the Intercontinental. I took the Intercontinental strap from him first. And then I came back and I had the Our Broadways with Bob.
What were your memories of working with Pedro?
Oh, Pedro had a lot of fire. You know, it was you know, good solid matches. Good. It's amazing. You know, you look at Pedro and the way he was, and sometimes you think he's slow or methodical or something about his work. But in those days in the ring, you know, he would sell and get the timing, and then he'd have that big fiery comeback. You know, and those lefts to the stomach would get stiff every once in a while.
So he was pretty much a pretty solid worker then.
Oh yeah, he was close, but it never hurt you.
Right.
Never. I don't think I was ever hurt. The time I tore my shoulder, I did it to myself in San Francisco.
What are your memories of working with Bob Backlund?
I like Bob.
What was he like as a person outside the ring? I've heard a lot of different stories.
I think Bob is just a terrific guy.
Right.
Personally, to me, you know, he's respectful, family-oriented, you know, Midwestern values, you know, religion and stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not really connected with, but that was him. When he was champion, he represented as the type of champion that he wanted to be. Clear-cut, college athlete, amateur wrestler, Olympic type, that we're in the Olympics now.
Right.
In this period, you don't know when you're marking the tape, but, the Olympics are going on. That's the kind of, he always had a coat and tie on. It's always neat, drove a Cadillac Seville all over the place because that's what the champion should have had, but he could afford it.
Right.
His investments, he wasn't flamboyant outside and stuff,
What was the locker room like as far as the other guys in the locker room at the time?
With who? With Bob?
No, as far as the whole locker room as a whole. Who was the locker room leader, I guess, at that time?
Oh, there was a lot of fun going on. Me and Moscow started in New York. My first run through New York, he was there.
Right.
So we used to raise a lot of hell. Fuji was there. I mean, we all had fun.
Fuji's pretty much the king of rivers.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, except on me. Everything he ever did to me would backfire. Anything he ever, like I had this old pickup truck one time, and I'm not a flashy kind of guy. So he took it and he put these orange lights all over, out of his own pocket. He paid for it. Did all these orange lights, and the thing it was all lit, lit up. So I said, oh Jesus, So one night we're coming out of Allentown, and the fog is so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face. Well, not me. I could drive as fast as I wanted. So he's trying to follow me through the. I says, I just couldn't believe it. Everything he ever did to me would backfire.
Right.
Double, But everybody else he catch with, he and I were close for a long time. I knew him from Dean's Gym in Waikiki before he even got into business.
Who'd you travel with back then?
On the road. On the road.
Yeah.
Where was this?
Titan.
The first time. Oh, probably Fuji. Him and Saito were tagged. Had the tag then. Fuji, Angelo Mosca. It wasn't that too much kayfabe around then, so
right.
I'd probably go to Rick Martel was there a lot. A lot of the guys just live in Hamden, around New Haven.
Right.
Work out of that World Gym, Mike Katz and Jerry Messengel's World Gym over there before they branched out. So it wasn't that kayfabe. Tony Gurria was around there.
Right.
So it wasn't that big a deal, who you're traveling with and stuff.
What are your memories of the Texas Death Match you had with Bob Backlund? I think it was at MSG.
Was that the hour falls after 1 hour?
Yeah.
All my matches with him were good. I thought, I don't know if I don't know if you sell any tickets nowadays, because you're going to go an hour, you got to lay in a hole for a while and sell,
Right.
You just can't go through 4 tables every 5 minutes.
Right.
It's just and come off. But God, we went one day. We had after a matinee and evening show in the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and we went an hour that afternoon and an hour that evening. Went 2 hours.
I was probably there.
2 hours we went an hour each time. We tried to make both hours completely different. Pretty much succeeded. I'm sure we overlapped.
Right.
Some things would cross over, but we tried to make them both.
Right.
Both unique.
I guess before, I'm going to jump ahead, but I'm going to go back again. Before Hogan came in, I guess 83, I think it was, and they took the belt away and they gave it to Sheik. What was all the boys' feelings on how they did it with Bob? From what I understand, I guess Vince didn't.
There was animosity.
Right.
You can't say, be ridiculous to say that there wasn't some type, guys, Backlund's colorless, Backlund can't work, Backlund has no personality, Backlund has no charisma. It didn't matter.
No, I mean, as far as the way Vince went about it, I was told that I guess Backlund didn't want to drop the belt, and they basically Arnie threw the towel in.
I don't know. I wasn't inside it. I don't know. Okay. I don't. From what I know, Bob would do the job.
Right.
As far as I know, Bob. But people say all this stuff. Backlund couldn't draw. Backlund. It didn't matter. You were going to draw. You're in New York. You're going to go to Baltimore. You had 3 weeks to promote it. You were going to sell out. You're going to go to the Spectrum. You had 2-3 weeks to promote it. You lined the card. It was.
Right.
He made sure his champ. And Bob always gave 110%. A lot of the knocks went on Backlund. Probably guys didn't get enough opportunity to make enough money with him. I made a slew of money with Bob. So, and then we were together in Japan just a couple of years ago, and he's a fun guy. He doesn't drink and smoke dope and get wild and stuff. But he's a good guy to be around.
Back to Vince McMahon Jr. How did the boys take to when Vince took over? When Vince Sr. passed?
I wasn't there when Senior passed. I'd come home for a couple of months, but I don't know. They didn't have too much choice to take it either way.
Right.
He pretty much grabbed.
How would you compare the two?
Oh, different. But Vince was going for a whole. Vince Jr. was going for a whole different thing, And at one time, he was dead broke. He'd paid out so much for his televisions and everything else, and the USA, and then he was just lucky to get.
This is before WrestleMania 1, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, right around the time when Snuka and I were on USA,
right,
and when we set that cable record there, and he was kind of with Piper and stuff, and Ole and Atlanta had moved. This whole thing started out of Columbus, Ohio. Over Columbus, Ohio, how they got they wanted to expand and everything out, but it basically came out of the state of Ohio, competing for Columbus, and because Atlanta used to go there, and then was so close from Pittsburgh for WWF that they went, and they were having. Then they had their turmoil, they butted heads over Columbus,
right?
And then Vince said, "Fuck it, I'm going."
You want to take over everything?
Yeah, he said that's and he got his marketing and his programming strategy, and he would have consultants, and I see all these different people, and all of a sudden started turning up on TV, marketing people, consultants, just whatever aspect that he needed,
right?
He would enlist the aid or the advice of somebody, without even thinking of says, I need marketing. I need a couple marketing strategists, and they'd come in and he would break off in their own entity of T-shirts, posters,
right,
fingers, whatever it is, and then the videotape guy from Toronto, the Coliseum Video. Yeah, he came in, and that became another portion of his, and the toys. And
that's when it just started. That was a big wrestling period.
Yeah, that's when he started delegating everything, and it's he got out of the wrestling business, as it were, and started delegating the toy business and the lunch pail business, and,
right?
The merchandising business, and the sweatshirts, and guys making commercials and that.
Ice cream bars.
Yeah, ice cream bars. Yeah, I was there for that.
Any good Jesse Ventura stories? I know you're surprised at his success.
Not really surprised at his success. I got a few good Jesse Ventura stories, but they're only secondhand.
Okay.
For there, I can't. They all come from Adrian.
Right.
Because he and Adrian were close for a long time, and Adrian and I were real close.
What was he like, Adrian?
He was crazy. He was insane. He was he was from Buffalo.
Right.
And he came down. I met him first in Florida. At one time in Florida, I think I was still a babyface, and he was a heel. Keith Franks at the time, and they would give us hassle. We were hanging around together. I said, well, I'd never worked with him. Then one time, I forget who the booker was, but just to be a prick, he booked him and I together in Tampa. And he was pretty much a preliminary guy, but a great worker at the time still.
Right.
But he hadn't found his niche in Adrian Adonis and stuff. Hadn't really made his big break. But all my good Jesse Ventura stories are pretty much secondhand.
Right.
From stuff because Adrian and I were close, and he had, how about this? Jesse went off over here. they had to tell Vern, you know, and had to do this. And, but they all ended up, you know, they all ended up blaming Adonis. It was always Adonis's fault, you know.
Right.
Like the time Moondog opened the door, airplane door.
What?
On Vern used to have a charter jet.
Yeah, remember who was talking about that? Somebody mentioned that on one of
Well,
the
it was funny. The Harley had been up there a couple weeks before.
Right.
So, but you know, Moondog, you know, and he'd heard about Moondog. You know, Moondog got drunk. I guess he made a mistake or something because he was just in town a few months ago. You know, that came up because he had Francis. We all had went up to dinner courtesy at KS house.
Right.
So, and he was that time. But he used to always go, goddamn Vern, the fucking Adrian, he get me all fucked up. I don't know what you know. So he would always go. It was always Adonis's fault. You know, Adrian, he gets me all fucked up. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah. So Gagne would, you know, Adonis.
Right.
You know, because Adonis was always catching the heat for everything. You know, Maurice was honest. You know, he was the man in Minneapolis anyway. You know. So he didn't know it. So he didn't know he didn't know he was burying Keith. I get all fucked up. But anyway, Adonis get me all fucked up. I opened the door. So, you know, but this is like a couple weeks later. Harley had the strap. He came back. So we were coming back. And this was a time in Florida we were chartering. We had a plane. We were flying every night. So we'd leave Tampa at 4:30, 5 o'clock. Be home 12:30. It was, you know, it was great back then. I mean, we were making $225 a week. That's what Curtis. But anyway, I was back there, and I was getting something out of doing something, you know. So I was kind of banging the chain on the door or something like that. And Harley jumps up and Grace locks me, throws me there, and everybody on the plane is all stunned, you know. Not at me, at Harley. You know, what the hell are you doing? You just attacked me, you know, out of nowhere. What do you know? You guys should be, you know, you should be grateful to me. I just saved everybody. You know, because he thought I was going to open the door like Maurice did again, you know. But those, you know.
When he opened it, was it in flight?
Yeah, they were in flight.
I think of Harley Race on his interview talked
Maybe
about
it was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was 'cause that's what happened. Harley had just come down, you know. We'd been in the cars and stuff before he comes, so I'm back in my bag, getting something out of my bag, and it was in the back of the plane. Next thing I'm waist locked and thrown across the Twin Beach, you know, and everybody's jumping on Harley. And Harley's going, "Hey, wait! I just saved everybody." You know, what do you mean, say? You know,
that's great. I guess back in WWF, you used to blow stats and eat food at ringside and stuff like that. And stuff like that, and you throw a belt around a lot. How did you come up with all those antics and stuff? Actually, you were just being a heel, but like, you were known for doing that. It was great.
I was just, you know, it's just kind of. I started with the food in Florida. Jerry Briscoe tackled me on the way to the thing. You know, he was always watching. You know, if I'd run. But then when I got Howard Finkel, those guys would love it. Right. You know, Jerry Briscoe would go, not right now, he'd probably love it too, but all the stuff I see him doing. But he was doing organizing the TV time and stuff every once in a while. He'd see me walking through I'd have to hide a sandwich or some potato chips or something. I'd be walking out because we'd walk out towards it was out in the auditorium where we did the interviews. Right. In front of the ring, and they were back in the office where they'd have the video in back, and they'd be watching it, you know. And more than once, Briscoe would run me down, steal my food, take my food away, wouldn't let me. But then I did the donut. We started with doing TV in St. Louis or something one day, and they wanted a bicycle to go around the whole circuit. All right. And Howard goes, oh, God. Here, and there was a box of Dunkin' Donuts or something. Somebody left, you know, had from the morning they brought from me. Oh, please do this one. All right. So, you know, I went and did that, and they bicycled that around all over the territories. Some of your greatest promos, of course, was Vince Jr. in front of the ring with Albano, and you're talking about Snuka and Rocky Johnson. All your promos back then were just amazing. So, what are your memories of your feud with Rocky Johnson? Rocky was. I remember I did one promo for him, and they had I used to love to do the Ernest Angley. You know, hallelujah, say please, baby, say baby. You know, I watched Ernest Ainsley, and what a talk about wrestling being a con business.
Right.
It's just this guy's the master. He's a supreme con, and he's got people. But I would love to do that. So they had a pulpit. They had a pulpit there. It had been sitting there all morning. All day. And nobody used it. This is how finally Howard Finkel was prodding. Come on. You do an earnest, and let's have an earnest. So there's a Playboy magazine. Somebody was, had a Playboy magazine. So I set the Playboy magazine up there and I opened it up, and it happened to be for. I don't know what happened to the promo. I'd love to get a copy of it because I don't think I ever saw it again.
Right.
But I just said, let me take you to the Garden Madison Street 33 Avenue 8 right here, and I hit the girl right in the, and I went on to the whole thing. I kept flipping the Playboy, and you couldn't see it,
Right, that's it.
But I'm doing all that, and doing my sermon for Rocky Johnson, and, and he had no brother and all that stuff.
Right.
So I remember that one. That was fun. Then I used to do the Ripper Collins. I had to throw the Ripper Collins tantrums. The Ripper started that.
Right.
Roll on the ground and kick and stomp and like a little baby, and pound my hands and pull my hair, and Rocky Johnson was calling me brother and stuff like that. So don't ever call me, and I just throw myself on my back and just throw a big, just that. But a lot of stuff you improvise is going on. You kind of keep current. AC/DC was they were playing the music, and Jackson Brown and Bob Seger, Turn the Page and all that. It's just whatever's current with the time. Whatever's.
You just put it into the storyline.
Yeah, whatever's kind of nowadays too. But I think back then in like the 70s was a real critical. I heard Dusty say that too. And the 70s was a real critical period of time when guys were when the real interview people were really forming. Curtis Alkea and a couple of those guys had set all the foundation and laid it, and so finally different people, and different personalities and stuff are cropping up around society, like the Dusty Rhodes with the Thunderbolt Patterson, and the black guy, and the hip cat, and the square guy, or punk guy. It's just continuation of society.
Right.
You're just trying to mirror society. And back then, when you're on top and when you're drawing money, when you're going for it, you're always trying to think, what kind of, whose mind you want to get into. You're going for your teenager, young college, your college student, teenager, young guy. They're the people that if you can sell them your bullshit,
right?
Then anybody else is going to buy it. Somebody in the corporate world is going to be, well, that's too much. But then, then they see everybody else catching up with it, and they see all the girls and everything else around there. They're going to be down. Pretty soon they're going to be caught up with it.
Right.
And corporate sponsor and everything else. So you always gear your interviews and your promos to, a good promo guy, good interview guy. What's current in society? What's going on today?
Right.
I'm not really thinking now. I haven't thought about promos. I imagine I'd probably be doing an Al Gore or George Bush, or somebody, somebody like that, or Bill. I'm sure Bill Clinton. He got this untouched material right here.
As far as working with Rocky, how was it?
Rocky was good. It was kind of a bone that the old man threw him in between me and Snuka.
Right.
I came back and I dropped the strap Intercontinental when I left to Pedro, and I came back and I took it back right away. My first match in the Garden, the first night. Was Bob still champion then?
Yeah.
I came back. I took the title from him, and the people. Snuka was so hot. If he hadn't had different setbacks in his own personal life, he'd be sitting where Hulk Hogan is today. But he just didn't have the business,
right,
and that type of drive to carry him through. But he was that big a star. Already as a babyface with no belt or anything.
Right.
And Albano, I think Ray Stevens had switched him.
Yeah.
And he was just red hot, and the people were just, so it was just a thing where I came back in, And just by him being around and me getting the title again, the people were just, you know, they were just ready for that match.
Right.
They wanted, so he threw Rocky in the middle there to you know, just prolong it just give it another 6 months.
Right.
Where Jimmy could travel around with Albano and Ray.
Right.
And they could make themselves another payday. Rocky made himself, you know, great couple paydays with going around with the Intercontinental strap thing.
Right.
I used to play ribs on him all the time, so every time he'd mess up a high spot, I'd give him a bump. He'd hate taking bumps.
Right.
Like, oh, you know what this means is,
his son a lot back, like he was probably a little kid back in the day.
Rocky,
come to the show and stuff.
I remember him from when
he was a baby.
Yeah, when he was a baby. In fact, the mother just sent us a couple weeks ago. Just sent us a video of when he was got to be around 12 years old, and he used to babysit my daughter.
Rocky.
The Rock. He used to. The mother used to, you know, Kelly, my daughter was like 2 years old, and he'd baby, you know, and he was around there. He's doing promos and stuff back then.
Dusty said he's got on video of Rocky when he was a little kid, give him the elbow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At like his house or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because I got on the tape we have. There's got he's doing stuff, and, you know, he's got arms like pipe cleaners, and he's you know,
Great.
he's flexing, he's telling stuff like that. So I'm sure you can sell that tape for millions right now.
We'll work something out when the video's on.
Yeah.
What are your memories of pairing with Albano, and how did it happen that they put you and Albano together as a team?
I don't know how it happened. It's just a office decision.
Right.
But whatever. He was okay. See, managers in New York, you didn't really work at that time. Up until that point, you didn't really work with them. You know, you beat TV. You did the TV with them.
Right.
You know, they lead you to the TV and stuff, and then you wouldn't see them again until Madison Square Garden. You know, and then they walk into the garden, bam, bam, bam.
Right.
And then that would be it. You know.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
What are your memories of the whole entire Snuka angle? It started on Buddy Rogers' corner. You're doing the promo with Buddy, and then Snuka had his match in the ring, and then I think you went off on him. He had the audacity to come out during your promo time, which led to you going down the ringside, and I think he spit on you, or you spit on him.
I spit on him.
You spit on him, and then he did the dive over the top rope.
Yeah.
And
ripped off all my clothes.
What are your memories of that?
Wow.
Good business.
Wow. Yeah. You know, it was great times. You know, not that business all over wasn't great there, but
right.
You know, but you know, yeah. But to be the focal point, you know,
right.
To be the man, you know, with the other man, you know, it's always, you know, it's a thrill. Yeah, and that thing was so hot at the time, you know, and wrestling was kind of just before Hulk.
Right.
And it was just like, it was right out, I think it was what you mentioned earlier, that Entertainment Tonight interview and stuff. It was after that. So there was more or less a national outlook, you know. I remember they had the most hated wrestlers.
Right.
The USA Today. It was me and Abdullah, and you know, and a couple. So it was getting more and more mainstream. USA network was carrying it, and they were shooting a lot of stuff live.
Right.
So I remember watching it back here with Valentine. I had left from the first time, the first time with Valentine and Bob, and some others, you know, Slaughter, Patterson Angle, and stuff like that.
Right.
So we were getting it live here in Hawaii.
How much money do you think that angle could have drawn today with you and Snuka?
Wow. I don't want to think I get depressed. It would have been
right.
I think it would have been you know, especially with the stuff they're doing with cages now.
What are your memories of the cage match? Probably one of the greatest cage matches of all time is the match with you and Snuka.
Well, the thing about the whole thing there, it was that Jimmy was having a lot of problems with the office
right
at the time, and his personal life and the office life and with the office, and things just weren't jiving, you know. So their biggest concern was how to keep Snuka hot, get him over, and yet keep the belt on me in a cage match. So that's, whoa, God. And I could actually see that finish way ahead of the time, which wasn't getting out of the cage wasn't the hard part. I just get in the middle and they hit me with a thing. I took a big bump back and I just went backwards through the door, and right down the stairs and on the floor. But that wasn't. I knew that wasn't what everybody, because he missed the dive with Backlund earlier on the cage match. I knew that wasn't enough. That would have killed. He was the gold. He was the goose, and that was the gold. So that would have killed the goose with the golden egg. So I said, well, I said, getting over stuff isn't any problem. We had to, we went over they were trying to figure out
how to get a seat back.
Yeah, they're trying to, I said, getting over isn't the problem. I said, I can get my hand raised. I said, what everybody wants to see him do is come off the top of the cage on me. I said, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
I said, boom, boom, boom. I said, hit me, boom, I'll go backwards over the top. I'll go down, I just cued the guy, get the gate ready. Here I come. Boom, set it up with a couple bumps. He came, hit me with that big flying headbutt. I just laid myself, went over the top rope, made sure I got the gate, and went straight down the stairs. I said, but you got to come. I said, you just don't wait, just, sell it for a second. Like, shit. And then come right back and get me. And he came back and get me, post, back into the thing, up, boom, up to the top, the dive, and I just throw the belt on me and spit on me.
Right.
Just like, you don't give a shit about the belt. You don't care. Just boom, boom, and he left. I just stayed. I wouldn't let him carry me out though. Getting carried out of Madison Square Garden was a little too. But I crawled all the way. I wouldn't let anybody carry me.
Right.
But I was just, and I needed help because his knee actually landed in my side here.
Right.
From the top here, and I couldn't. Every time for about a month later, if I leaned forward, I couldn't control. I ended up falling down, because he pinched that muscle over there that I landed. So I said, it's getting over isn't the rough part. It's just, it's not killing our gooses, lays our golden eggs here. Because Jimmy was just, too great a talent. And so out of all the matches, we were able to find and then we had like Fuji strap matches and stuff like that. I was able to find my way out of all that stuff and, still keep, as a heel, it's easy if you don't mind. Nowadays, I guess you just can't lay there and be dead at the end of the match and get your hand raised. You got to, but back in those days, you could win, and the more down you are that you're winning, the more heat you would get. I remember most of the time I just, the top man, top. If I had to cover somebody, I barely, just something where I could barely crawl,
right.
Where he'd get his feet back and stuff afterwards, and but with no way I should have won at any time,
What are your memories of? You had some good matches also with was you and the Samoans against Andre, Snuka, and Rocky Johnson. I believe that one happened in Philadelphia. I was there for that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you guys went around the loop with that match, I think.
Well, Andre was always. I as a heel, I never really had any problems with anybody in the business.
Right.
Never had a hard time with anybody. So, I'd go in and do the Giants high spots. Drop down, and bend over, run into the ass.
Yeah, right.
And all that, and then Snuka's, and then Snuka and I were naturals easy, and then I was natural Rocky, and that was so
easy.
Everything back in those days, everything was fun. It was the pre WrestleMania days where you were married to one guy night after night after night after night after night. Where you just after a while you lost all imagination, all vision about the business.
How crazy was Jimmy outside the ring, as far as?
Visibly he wasn't crazy. Still waters run deep. So, and the things went on in his mind. Like the time, I 3 weeks after we did that angle where he came over the top rope was when the Nancy Valentino had her, the accident there. I was, me and Fuji were in the back of the George Washington Hotel. I remember I'm not much of a hockey fan, but during the playoffs, I used to like to watch the bars and stuff for loaded. So I was back there watching the playoffs and stuff. And what happened that night is that my phone rang about 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was emergency. And Eddie Gilbert had just run his brand new Lincoln Town car up the ass of some semi-trailer. And the car dragged him a couple miles down the road, not even knowing. His car's on fire, blazing, everything going on. And Eddie respected me, and he was a good kid at the time. He liked me, so he didn't. I don't know if he knew what was going on, but he told him to call me. And I was kind of liaison with the office at the time, before Patterson and those guys came over and took over. And so he called me, so I went to the hospital to get, he had like couple grand in his pocket. That was gone, So I took all his money and his wallet, what was left of it, and took it back. And then I got back and I called Vince, and then at the same time right in the next emergency area, Nancy was there, and she was having her troubles, and so I got back.
Jimmy's girlfriend?
Yeah.
Right.
So I got back to the hotel, it's like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning already, I'm, what's happening? I'm already punch drunk. And I look out, and these guys in suits are trying to talk to Snuka. And I said, excuse me, can I help you, So yeah, Mr. Nancy Valentino succumbed last night at Allentown Memorial. We're trying to talk to us. Oh God, because we just shot the angle 3 weeks previously.
Right.
I'm like, oh my God, there goes mine.
Right.
There goes mine. So I got on the phone. I had Vince's number. I was talking to Vince. So I said, hey, they're over in Hamburg. I said, can we get, you guys want to follow me? I said, hey, I haven't been to sleep. So I was with Eddie Gilbert all night. I haven't been to sleep. I haven't had anything to eat. I said, there's a couple cold beers. You guys are fine. I said, hey, whatever you want. We're homicide detectives. We're not cop. Right. I'm driving to Allentown, drinking beer. Going on the thing, and the cops are following me down. And we got together. The police and stuff. And eventually everything worked itself out. But
what actually happened in that incident? He was allegedly murdered.
I don't know. What he says, and I spent the day with him that day. It was, it was a traumatic day for everybody. What he said that they went stop to pee on the side of the road. She came and hit some gravel and slipped and hit her head.
Right.
And to my knowledge, they found nothing really to contradict that. Just that they had a history of, of fighting in motel rooms before,
Was she dead in the hotel room, or she died?
She died in the emergency where Eddie Gilbert was at.
Right.
When Eddie was there, because when I was leaving to go see what was going on with Eddie, the emergency was there already, taking her out.
So his head trauma or something?
I suppose, yeah.
Let's see. From there, I guess Piper came in.
Yeah.
And he came in with Orndorff, and I think Bob Orton came in.
Yeah.
No, David Schultz came in with him.
Yeah.
Did you? Were you kind of nervous that you were going to lose your number one heel spot at the time, or?
Not really. No. There was enough work to go around for everybody by that time.
Right.
They were 2-3 times a night. It wasn't. Like. Piper was going a different way anyway. He was going with Piper's Pit.
Right.
And his thing which was fairly innovative. He didn't want to wrestle on TV because he wasn't wasn't really the New York stature, the big guy,
smaller,
260-pound plus guy that they had.
Right.
But neither was I by that time. I was in my 240s by then too.
Was there a lot of influence from the office to get bigger and bulk up back in those days, or?
No, not really. You did it because it was you knew you're going to New York,
So you did it to make more money.
Yeah, the Stan Hansons and Bruiser Brodies and it was always a big guy, the big monsters they used to bring in for the champion.
Right.
It was it was the pre-worker days. They didn't bring in a lot of workers. Ray Stevens would come in, but not for a whole lot of show. They didn't have the time to get good workers over.
Right.
It was just more like the brawl or brutal kind of guys they would get over. run him through with the champion, and then Bruno was previous, and then Backlund. It was pretty much the same program. Then when I came, they started varying it a little bit. When Hogan came in, what was the vibe like? Well, it was different. You knew everything was going big time then. Right. That was the end of chapter 1. Huh. And then chapter 2, the wrestling business started, because that's when international and TV. Right. That's just tedious, nonstop. Travel everywhere. Work. It's just worked you to death until you went crazy. Curtis always, he says, you're a big shot, because I used to always come back here to Hawaii every winter, or most winters to surf. When I was living in Santa Cruz, I didn't have to, but I always, you always stiff Jim Barnett and leave to go back home to Hawaii. But kind of keep your head straight, you kind of being in the ocean, being in the water, kind of, it helps your humility keep down. You're not all powerful being that you're on that you're out there telling everybody you are. Right. Every night, So after a while, you get with Vince there, the big trowels, the big TV, big surf, big everything, You lose your grip. You lose contact, with what's going on. So you would like to take time off to get your head back together? Yeah, it would come, But as it turned in, then it was everything was so competitive and so, politics and stuff. Yeah, that you couldn't afford to. If you left, you were, Your spot was gone. Yeah, and it would be real hard getting it back. When WrestleMania 1 came around, why weren't you on that show? You were still with the company at the time. Yeah, because I was coming out with Hulk. Okay. They need somebody to come out of the everything. We went to Madison Square Garden after that, in about 3/4 house. Right. It's maybe not even 3/4. Well, it was 3/4, but it was, wasn't the usual sellout. We built up to that, but you didn't do you didn't have a program with him, really, did you? No, I never had a program at all. Why is that? I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to work with me, or right. I wasn't one of his guys. Well, I was never really one of his guys. George Scott was doing the booking anyway. Right. So he wanted to use me to get over Steamboat and a couple of his guys. He brought his crew in. So right. I was the established heel and established talent there. So he wanted to push Ricky. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But did any of the boys have a problem with Mr. T being used as a wrestler at WrestleMania 1? No. It was basically. I guess if they did, it's too bad. Right. Good for the business publicity and all. Yeah, that was it was changing then. Everything was already on the move then. Cyndi Lauper, Lou Albano. It was like the first MTV video, and right. Lou Albano was in it. Everything was changing. I made $2,000 for taking a punch. One night in Boston. In fact, they gave me a $2,000 bonus for making him. He was in there, and he hadn't been around. I guess he'd been working out in the ring, whatever he was doing and stuff, And it was a tag where they wanted him to run, jump in and do something. And, I could tell that he wasn't real comfortable. T wasn't a real big guy. Right. Anyway, I said, brother, just go ahead and hit me. I said, don't worry. I said, nothing's going to happen. It's all it's all part of the job. I said, just lay back and, come with whatever you got. I said, watch the teeth, right. Try not to break anything, but, I said, don't hold back. I said, just go for it, So he felt, it made him feel, yeah, he felt comfortable, and the punch didn't look that bad. Stiff or no? Huh? Did he stiff it or no? Yeah, it was a little. I took a big bump for him, and he gave me a knee lift. I went over the top, and people popped, and I looked at my check, and whoa, I got a $2,000 bonus for taking, taking a lot of stiffer punches right. Before and since. How did you get paired up with Mr. Fuji? That's a good question. I guess pretty much knew. We were both from Hawaii. Right. And when they were tagged, we were always together. We traveled together. We hung out together when my first trip there, and then back. And I guess as he got into the managerial thing. You know, it just became sort of almost a natural.
Right.
That him and I.
We were talking about his rib stories earlier and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
That was one of my questions, if you have any good rib stories on Fuji, but pretty much covered that already.
A lot of them.
Fuji Vice.
Oh yeah, all
What are
those.
your memories on that stuff? All the skits on TV.
Oh, those are crazy. They were all, you know, it was all a thing where, you know, like, here's the script. Okay, that's enough. They didn't want you. The worst, the badder you were as an actor, the more they liked, you know, the better it was. They didn't want you to prepare for anything. You know, if you murdered the lines, the more you murdered the lines, the more, you know, the more you did anything, you know, the better it was, because the more horrible, you know, it became. You know, we started off with that soap opera, because we did it off a Search for Tomorrow or something.
Yeah, some TNT show.
Yeah. Well, it was the old real soap opera.
Right.
The original soap opera. Search. It's one of the few that got canceled, I guess. But and Hulk was there, and he was going to that town that they were involved in at the time. And Fuji and I, you know, they started doing stuff, and I broke up the thing, and they started with the Tuesday Night Titans thing.
Right.
You think, you know? I said, hey, I know I know I can act. I can know, you know. That's when we got. And Moolah was always my girlfriend.
Right.
Although they did hire two twins, the two penthouse twins one time to rub me down with oil and stuff.
Right.
But, you know, naturally Fuji had the big bottle of oil, and there was no shower in the back. He must put a gallon and a half of oil on me, and I was just dripping in oil all day. And he had these models rubbing my toes and stuff, you know.
Right.
Big tinted twins, you know. And I guess they were centerfold for penthouse or something. And Vince had hired him to come down. And just shooting oil just down my back, just running down. And oh God.
When Ricky came in, what was your memories of the Ricky Steamboat feud? You had some great matches with him.
He was a hard worker, conscientious, but you know, he was, you know, he'd very meticulous, very conscientious about, you know, drawing money. Wanted to draw money, wanted to do business, you know, do just about anything. It was a dream to work with.
Right.
You know, and we did super business everywhere we went.
A lot of people say he was like one of the hardest workers out there.
Could be.
Right. In your opinion, who is? Who are some of the guys that you worked with that are top-notch performers?
Oh, starting from old guys. You got Stevens and Koloff, Larry Henning, starting all the way back here from Hawaii. You know, this business is littered with great workers. Curtis, you know, Dory Funk Jr. was always, you know, that style, that funk style, you know, that he had was always phenomenal. Murdoch could work his ass off over any. Dickie Slater, Terry Funk, you know who. Right. Find me two guys who can outwork. You know, somebody could outwork Murdoch or Dickie Slater or Terry. You know, even when he's not doing the crazy stuff. You know, just doing his, you know, just Japan. Right. Get down and grind it out. You know, previously, you know, the old Japan, get down and grind it out. You can't swear at the audience, you can't do nothing because nobody knows what you're saying. Anyway, you know, just guys like that.
What was the difference, to jump ahead again, what was the difference in wrestling Roddy Piper at the first meeting in the ring compared to Georgia, or was it basically the same?
Same thing. He just, you know, he's going a million miles an hour. I remember we were somewhere one time, wasn't there, but I think we were in Charlotte or something. He's hit me about 75 times and slamming. I got just, you know, okay, slamming. He stopped me. I said, how? I said, when? Yeah, I can't. You know, and then he finally, you know, he realized, you know, he was, you know, just going out of sight speed. But he was basically the same worker all the time.
Right. He had a lot of power back then too, because.
Oh yeah.
How do you think that came about? Just his attitude.
Yeah, and he used to do his business in the office. You know, he used to have his talks with Vince and stuff.
Right.
Everybody had their own little clique, you know, their own little group.
Who did he hang out with as far as other boys?
He hung out with me a lot. Bob. Anybody.
Bob Orton?
Yeah.
Right.
Anybody, you know, he was,
right.
Piper was easy to, you know, if you're, you know.
Was there a lot of backstabbing in the locker room at that time, or?
No, not really. You know, there were personality conflicts, of course.
Right.
Well, you know, there always is. But I don't think there's really no need. You know, you really couldn't get any. There would be. You know, I'm sure there was a lot going on. You know, different guys, different places at all times.
Right.
But you know, pretty much things are all. You know, the wrestling business is great because it's pretty much things are all already set in stone, and they're, you know, you're not going to, regardless how much, you know, this guy goes and squeals in the office, you know, it's not going to change. The program's already lined up, you know.
Right.
Different territories before that, like maybe Vancouver when I first started, you know, guys, you know, that could have happened, and smaller territories before that went together, you know. I'm sure that happened a lot, but you know, once you got to the bigger territories, which were I, you know, after my first couple of years in the business, is where I spent most of my time in the bigger territories. That you know, the program, the book is already set
right
for 6-8 months in advance. So, you know, if you're an asshole or not, you're still gonna get going. You know, you still, you know, set the rest of Dustin St. Petersburg, and
right,
you know, May 24th, and you got the champion, you know, in June, and you got this guy, and you got that guy. You know.
What are your memories of working with Tito Santana? You had some great matches with Tito.
Tito's easy,
right?
Easy. For always easy. Poor Tito. The night I dropped the strap to him in Boston, we followed everything. You know, UFC banned everything. Everything had come through. That night. I think Hulk was in. I don't know if Hulk was back in the territory, but it was wild. You know, we're in Boston Gardens, and we were the last match, and some arrogant guy was a cameraman. You know, the airhead, arrogant,
right?
And he was telling, you know, trying to tell. I said, just film the thing. So we started, you know, and the place was just turmoil. You know, we had to settle it right back down. Started from, you know, just from the curb, the street level, and try and build it back up. So we had to go a good 25, 30 minutes, you know, to get the match. We just started slow. And then by the time, you know, after about 10, 15 minutes, people had forgotten all the pandemonium and chaos, and they finally gotten back into our match. So I figured out a finish where he just catches me some sunset flip out of the middle of the ring and rolls me up and gets. But the cameraman didn't have enough film, so he missed over half the match. So you know, Tito's whole the whole thing of him getting the belt and everything else never got televised. Never got on film.
Cool. David Schultz, what was he like on the road?
I never been like. In fact, he hit that guy.
John Stossel.
Yeah, he hit that guy before I came into New York.
Right.
That was like my 6 month. I was out of there. That was the time, I think, when I went to Atlanta and had slapped Piper.
Right. And
that was the time when I'd been and came back, and my wife was pregnant. That thing over there. So that's Joe. Hello, Joe.
Camera shot.
My youngest son. So, what were we talking about?
David Schultz.
Yeah. So when I got back, he was already, you know, on his way out. It was cost the office $100,000, him $100,000.
Right.
All kinds of different stuff.
I was told that Vince put him up to do it, basically.
Could have been. Right. I wasn't there. Right. I wasn't. You know, I was back here in Hawaii, but he used to love to drive Barnett crazy. He used to get his checks and send them back. You know, he would just, it was, you know, total rap. You know, I'm not getting paid enough. I want to do this.
Right.
You know, he was, you know, the real Tennessee redneck. He gave him a hard time.
Right. How did your pairing come about with Adrian Adonis and Bob Orton? I know how, but as far as with Rowdy Piper before
the feud,
right? The Flower Shop. You were hosting Piper's Pit. Piper wasn't there.
Oh yeah. I did. Well, they tried me at I did a bunch of Canadian host spots and different host spots, and then Adonis's.
Flower Shop.
Yeah. It's somehow like I don't know. I don't really remember too well. But they had Orton split up with him.
Right.
And then they had
with Adrian.
Yeah, then he went with Adrian. And I never really got that involved. Well, I used to wear the kilts and stuff. I remember Vince gave me the pair of kilts, and so here, wear these,
What are your memories of your matches then? Because I think you worked maybe a couple times.
Yeah.
You did the angle with him with the leg. I think you worked Saturday Night's Main Event.
Yeah.
At one time. And it's good stuff. What are your memories of matches with Paul Orndorff at WrestleMania 2?
Oh, short, fast. Didn't get much done. It was just we started at the WrestleMania off, and they had great anticipation. But
right.
What the hell are you going to do in 8 minutes?
What was Paul like outside the ring?
I like Paul. I still talk to Paul. I think he's. I don't know if he's still involved in Atlanta.
No, he is. He does the camp. In fact, he just worked their last pay-per-view.
Last week he got real hurt. He got a stinger, and they had to stretch him out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know his neck has been bad. I'm so glad.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
His neck was bad at that time.
Right.
But
your memories of WrestleMania 3? You guys worked Can-Am.
Oh, that was wow.
Right.
Yeah, 98,000 people. That was insane.
That was Canada.
Oh yeah, no, that was Detroit.
Silverdome.
Silverdome.
Okay. That was Hogan Andre WrestleMania 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a Silverdome. That was insane. See, you look up, and you get the people at the top of the bleachers, and they had good seats. Everybody can see you. That's insane.
How did Vince Jr. change as the success came in, as far as personality?
Got more maniacal.
Really?
Yeah. More, he just, he started, he was running, was like, who was that guy? Teflon Don?
Don King?
No,
Scarfo?
Yeah.
John Gotti.
John Gotti, yeah. Yeah, he got, he had his little gang with him, and, Patterson and his boys and their thing, and then his TV guys, and then there was his little crew.
Do you think he got greedier as time went on?
I don't know if it's a case with greed with Vince or just ego.
Right.
I'm sure, he could have got out with the money he got after the old man died,
Right.
And, there was enough money going around then for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. I'm sure. But he was, I don't think it's. With Vince, I don't really think it's a case of greed. I think it's a case of wanting to be
bigger than what he was.
Yeah, bigger than Ted Turner, bigger than that. Be a multi-millionaire. He wants to be a billionaire. TV's that. Wrestling, wrestling's outdoing Monday Night Football. He wants XFL. He wants He wants to outdo NFL. He just P.T. Barnum. He wants
the big show.
He just wants to go. He just wants, he's just driven. He can't take a vacation. He can't, he can't relax. He's just,
workaholic.
Yeah, I don't think it's, somebody's he's just maniacal. His obsession. I watched some of these matches that with him and his kid in, and I'm asking, when we look at their checking account, you go, why?
They don't need to do that.
Yeah, that's the last thing
he
needs to do is have Steve Austin kick the shit out of him.
Right.
That's but and that kind of got me curious. I'm kind of thinking, why did he put himself into the business? Probably has something to do with that stock more going public on Dow Jones and stuff.
Right.
Why, how he got himself and the wife and the kids involved.
What are your memories about Junkyard Dog?
Junkyard Dog was a good time.
Right.
Good fun. He get go into his little paranoid states or something, at time. But he was a baby face. If he didn't want to be moved, you couldn't move him.
Right.
He was a big old dog. He was, like Abdullah the Butcher, anybody else, he's got his, his style. So you gotta cater to their style. You can't. especially as a heel, you know, you can't build him around to drop kick and flying head scissors guy, you know, match me bump for bump and stuff like that.
Were drugs really out of control in those days with the boys? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's crazy. Everybody had, you know, not everybody, but
painkillers.
a lot of guys. Yeah, cool.
Everything.
Yeah. It was, you know, the best of times and the worst of times.
You wrestled the British Bulldogs with Bob Orton. Was Dynamite pretty banged up at that time?
Yeah, in fact, the match in Hamilton's when he got crippled in the ring.
Right.
When something ran over to, I don't think he ever was, you know, giving him the knee from outside the ring or something.
Right.
I don't think he ever made it to me. I think he just jumped over Bob and went down there like that. And that was it. He couldn't move. And for a couple, you know, it was like that for a while. I think it was like one of those, I'm pretty sure it was like one of those in-between pay-per-views. It was like after WrestleMania or something like that. I forget what it was. It came out of Hamilton, Ontario.
Right.
And that's me and Bob were working with the Dynamite and Davey. And that's in the back room. He was backing up.
What are some of the other teams you like to work with back then? Because you started doing a lot of tag.
Yeah, well, they put me with Bob, yeah. Right. I think the reason they put us with Bob, we had a match. Somebody didn't show up. Piper, something happened to Piper or something else. They had me and Orton who would work with Snuka and Hulk in Boston Garden. I never heard a place go as loud as it. We did. I caught something. Jimmy came off the top, cross body blocked me while I was standing up, and Orton had the cast. As he came off, Orton, boom, caught him with the cast. I kept going to the rope and dumped him over the top. He got juice meantime, Hogan came in. Hogan made the comeback, and the people just blew. I didn't think they could get any higher. You know, I just didn't think, you know, you could get the Boston Garden any higher. And Hogan, and all of a sudden, Snuka came up on the other end with the juice, and then they just double blew again. You know, it was just, you know, you can't, you know, you just don't hear things like that, you know, that many times in your life, you know. And I think that's how you kind of worked our way into me and Bob becoming tag team.
What happened to Rowdy? Why did he leave the company at the time? Did he have a fallout with Vince, or?
Probably movies. That's usually why he's left all, you know, all his WCW and stuff he's always wanted to.
I know he did the movie, John Carpenter, I think it was the Alien movie.
Yeah, he's done quite a few actually. Most of them
a lot of B movies.
never made it just to cassettes, but he's actually done a lot of stuff.
Right.
So I think most of the times he would leave would be not so much with disputes. I think he had other projects going on. Because he was real close with a couple Disney guys. He was with Cyndi Lauper, you know, Cyndi Lauper and
David Wolf.
David Wolf was her boyfriend at the time. So he, you know, he pretty much manipulated that whole situation. How, I don't know, you know, that started really before I'd come back to New York. But he'd gotten into that. And then, you know, then he had, you know, a real desire to be a movie star.
Right. Were you really apprehensive about going babyface at the time?
Yeah, I was. At that time, I wasn't.
You didn't want
The Rock. I didn't like The Rock. I didn't like being The Rock. That's why everybody, you know, said, you're the original Rock.
Right.
Oh God, I think that was a rib Pat Patterson played on me, naming me The Rock. Because I never wanted to be a Rock or a Boulder.
Right.
You know, just I was happy as Magnificent Muraco, spitting on people and blowing my nose and drooling, and you know,
that's great.
Yeah, you know, that was probably closer to the real me than you know, than laying. By that time, I was able to lay back and sell, but I'd be moving, and you know, as a heel, you're moving and doing anything else, and then you put the brakes on, you go back to babyface. You know, you just got to lay there and wait till you get the heat and come back, you know, and stuff like that. And by that period, you know, the work had become so repetitious because we're traveling and working so hard at the time, you know, and pretty much the same guy every night. you know, it was just, you know, like when I was at Steamboat, I was at Steamboat every night. When I was with Valentine, I was with Valentine every night. With Butch Reed, you know.
I remember that, right?
Yeah. So you do, you know, your promos, everything. After a while, in those days, I think there was a tendency to get stale real fast. You know, not real fast, but you know, you get bored and stale. You know, and a lot of the ring work reflected it. I can see the guys now. You know, they're not working that much, and every you know, Monday night's a big show, and then the WrestleManias and the big shows that they have. So they're pretty much fresh, and they're working with different guys a lot,
right,
and stuff every time. We're back at that time, the first thing every night, you know, nothing, no disrespect to Steamboat or Valentine, or even to myself. You know, I'm sure they might say the same thing. You know, they got sick of seeing me.
Right.
There's no, you know, wrestling when I started, you know, back Minneapolis days and through Roy Shires and everything else, and Florida, 80 Graham, and was always a learning, creative process where you're always, you know, you were always trying to better yourself. You know, my timing was wrong here. My interview, I can do this. I hear this piece on the radio, Tom Cruise and the Top Gun pilot, or, you know, and this, you know, everything you could work, you know, all your daily life and current events and Kent State or whatever happened to be going on at the time. You work into your life, you work into the match. You know, you're working with different guys every night. So, like when you asked me about different matches with Piper and stuff earlier, you know, I was working with different guys all the time. So, you know, every night you know, you're creating something different. You're creating a new thing. You got you got Rocky Johnson one night. You got, you know, Tony Atlas. You got Roddy Piper. You got this. So your personalities are changing. So different. You know, obviously, I'm not going to be, you know, flying around for Roddy Piper the way I am Tony Atlas.
Right.
You know, Tony Atlas with all the big muscles and Piper with the leaner build. You know, so you were able. You know, you're still using your brain back then. And then after a while, when Vince got on that maniacal, you know, road, you know, thing with everything else, and, you know, all you pretty much could do was make it to the town, you know, get in the hotel, work out, you know, find your drugs, and, you know, get back to the room, or, you know, whatever, you know. Right. It wasn't, then at 7 o'clock in the morning, next morning, the same thing would start. You'd fly to the next town, you'd rent a car, check in a hotel, find a gym, eat, go to the building, back. 7 o'clock the next morning, the same thing would start again.
As far as drugs and with you, when you became The Rock, you really bulked up pretty big.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of pressure to use steroids, or
no pressure?
No.
That's internal pressure. You know,
right.
You could come in before the ride, but you come in. You know, you see Hogan's got the strap. You know, and you can't. You know, you know, being 235, 245, you're gonna have a hard time getting the match over. You know, they're just not mid. You know, that's eye gouging and stuff you can do. So you know you gotta bulk up. It's just, I think it was all onboard drugs all started from, you know, with the football players and everything else. It was everybody's own, you know, personal goal or personal intentions of getting better and improving. At that time they were legal, and you know,
right,
and they worked.
Right,
they worked. You know, I actually had abs those days.
Right.
You know, so
it's pretty ironic that Rocky Johnson's son stole your gimmick name basically because you feud with Rocky. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But, what are your memories of being paired with Superstar Billy Graham when they put you and Superstar together?
Billy Graham was a mellow guy.
Right.
He was just, you know, he was, he'd had his falling outs with Vince and stuff, Vince Sr. before, and his hips were really bad. So he was really fragile at the time. When I first came in, he had a real bad substance abuse problem. You know, he would just, you know, it was just uppers and downers from the doctor, and you know, it wasn't coke or any of that stuff, you know. But I remember he would go and, you know, take a handful of something, go into the bathroom, fall asleep. You know, guys, the Ramada Inn in New York City, they couldn't get in the bathroom, doors locked. He's asleep in the bathroom, they couldn't get him out, you know. But after that, he cleaned out and he came back when he was my manager and stuff. And
go ahead. All right. You had a program with Butch Reed?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was okay. It was good. Butch was good to work with. He was a hard-working guy.
What led you to leave the World Wrestling Federation?
I just had a falling out with Backlund when we were in Europe. And Vince gave me some time off. They said, well, you can't, you know.
Nick was a road agent at the time, right?
Yeah. And he'd done a lot of chicken shit things when he came in to everybody. Why, I don't know. Some people said that they brought him in just to get rid of me. Whether that's true or not, you know.
So did you leave on good terms with
somebody? With Vince, I left on good terms, yeah. He told me, I got to let you go for a while, you know. I just can't have it. I just said thank you.
Right.
And then I realized, you know, by that time, my body wasn't responding the way I liked it. You know, I wanted it to. I wasn't moving the way I used to. I was moving 3 or 4, 5 years before that. Maybe it was a steroid. Maybe it was the drugs. You know,
right.
Taking. I was doing a lot of leg work, and my legs they got slower or something. Or I think I just got old.
Right.
Like I see guys now. You know, I watching football games, the football players, or baseball, or basketball, or whatever, wrestling. You know, I see a guy that starts to tear a groin or something. I can see that as, you know, that's coming, because that groin injury doesn't come to you're 36, 37, 38 years old. You can kind of see, because that's what happened to me. I snapped it. I was black and blue from here all the way out, just totally black.
Right.
I snapped a groin in St. Louis, working with Valentine. You know that avalanche thing where you throw your leg up,
right,
and fall back, or you set up. Used to set up the leg thing. When I used to do that leg thing, I threw my leg up and wham, my whole groin, my leg blew up, and God, it was one of those. You know, it was just incredibly painful.
Switched it.
Okay. Words cannot describe this place where we're at right now. It's amazing. Check out. Did you ever consider going to NWA or WCW when you left Vince, or back to Atlanta? Or?
Yeah, I suppose I considered it. I never called. You know, I figured I'd probably, you know, go back to Vince, or I don't know what I didn't really, you know, I just kind of, I did a couple independent shows.
Herb Abrams, what was he like? WWF?
He was nuts.
I heard he was nuts.
He was a nut.
Do you have any good stories?
Kid. Huh?
You have any good stories?
Oh God, not too many. I just, when I met him, you know, just his personality in general.
All right.
You know, he'd call, you know. I remember Orton was going, he'd give him there, Tony, I'll go eat something. Be quiet, Bobby. You know, he was a classic. He had like 50 American Express cards, something like that.
Right.
And he maxed out all the cash on him to run the wrestling shows, and then, you know, he'd fly me, you know, he'd fly me all the way over here, and every time except for one, his check cashed, and then he even made good on that. So
You heard it happen to him, right? How he died.
yeah, he started cocaine, setting off fire alarms in some hotel, a couple hookers.
Yeah.
He was nuts.
How did the boys view him? Just basically a money mark, or
Herb Abrams?
Yeah, it was him.
Yeah. Mr. Mark.
Yeah. As far as your initial impressions of ECW, you came in when Eddie Gilbert was booker there.
Yeah.
Which is pretty ironic because you were an Eddie back in the days.
Yeah.
What was
actually, I think it was before.
It was Todd Gordon as well.
Todd Gordon was running it, and it really wasn't developed as ECW yet.
It was Eastern Championship Wrestling
at
the time.
And then Todd got more into it, you know.
Right.
And then he started. Then he bought. But I'd been there a few times before Eddie came in.
Right.
Right. He was looking for a booker, but I couldn't commute. There was no way for me to commute from Hawaii to Philadelphia.
Terry Funk was doing.
Yeah.
They did
I was
TV.
there before Terry even.
Right.
Because Bob Artiste, the announcer,
right,
was a real close family friend of ours, and somehow I don't know he got connected with Todd Gordon, but he did. And he's the one who got me, you know, set me up there.
What were your thoughts on ECW when you first came? Because it was pretty much all young talent, except when you came in, it was you. Candido just started out at the time working there, and Snuka was there, right? Yeah. Terry Funk was doing announcing.
Yeah.
And Doug Gilbert wasn't in yet.
Nah.
It was basically Paulie was managing you guys at the time.
Paulie came in right like when you left.
Yeah. They had that girl Sunny wasn't even Sunny yet.
Yeah, she was just there.
Yeah, she was just a guy's girlfriend or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was I don't know. It was pretty much when I was there. It was just like an independent
TV.
promotion. Yeah.
Did you think it would ever escalate
No.
to what it has today?
No, I saw Gordon dumping a bunch of bucks.
Yeah.
You know, I saw him spending lots of money in there
Right.
and not making it back. They had the building and stuff. I was happy to see him, you know, enter as a third market.
Right. What stopped you from coming back in the last couple of years to any of the big, just basically,
Old age.
right?
Old age. Can't move like, you know.
Right.
I could, you know, I could get by, I suppose, you know, but I can go down, but it takes me a long time to get up.
What
I
have,
got to
you,
get up in pieces.
what have you been doing in the last couple of years since you've been,
Longshoreman.
which is what?
I work on the docks. I load, unload ships.
Cool.
Big, you know, so I learn a whole different, and I surf all the time.
Right.
You see it outside.
Awesome. How would you compare wrestling today to your era?
Wow. I think it's too bad. I think it's phenomenal. It's unreal, but I can't see these guys making a living, make a livelihood out of it like I did. I had 20 great years.
As far as because of the way they work today, the style, because they're going to kill themselves.
Yeah, I can't see anybody's body lasting longer than 10 years. You know, just generally speaking, not derogatory about anybody, but I just can't see it. You know.
Do you think it's the promoter's fault, or do you think that there's so many hungry young guys out there that they know they could get replaced?
Yeah. Can you top this?
Right.
You know, I can do this. I'm going to do that. You know, I don't give. You know, Cactus Jack kind of started it all. Well, actually, he started it all in the modern era. But I remember Lonnie Main in Portland when I first started. You know, when I was making the trips down from Vancouver. I remember I was there. Maybe it was the first night I was there. Lonnie Main was up there standing on the top turnbuckle. Somebody drop kicked him from the back, and he went right from the top turnbuckle right onto the cement. I mean, this is 1970.
Right.
You know, Lonnie Main. You talk about great, you know, Cactus Jack and, you know, Nick Foley taking bumps and stuff. Lonnie Main and Bulldog Bob Brown and guys like that were, you know, Lonnie Main was taking insane bumps.
Dynamite Kid too. He was headbutts off the top rope.
Dynamite, yeah, Harley.
Right.
Harley Race.
Right.
I used to do a lot of crazy shit myself. You know, I top rope slams upside down. Ray Stevens. I used to do it from the top all the way to the floor. That's how Gordon Soley hurt his ankle.
Right.
It ended up being his hip eventually. Bayfront Center with Koloff. Koloff was before we got to working up to the cage, but he gave me the turnbuckle, or I don't know, upside down over the turnbuckle, out over the top pole, and I hit Gordon in the ankle. Then it escalated to where he had to have a hip replacement. It was several years later, you know.
Right.
But I see, you know, it's great, you know, the stuff, the way they're doing it, it's exciting, but I can't see them lasting the way I did for 20 years. I mean, most of the guys I worked with, you know, lasted 15, 20, 25 years.
Are you shocked that Flair still is in the spotlight?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Right. Do you still watch everything?
A little bit, you know.
Were you going to say something about Rick? Or?
No, I just kind of, you know.
Okay.
I'm amazed that he keeps going as hard as he does. You
Even
know.
Hogan, he's still.
Yeah, he hasn't been around for a while.
Nah, he had a falling out. Well, who knows? Who knows what the real story is? But supposedly him and Vince Russo and WCW parted ways.
I don't know. You know. But yeah, I'm amazed to see Flair move like that. I always ask myself, why? You know, because he's, you know, I'm 50. He's the same age as me.
Right.
You know, he's got Gold's gyms, and I'm sure he could have a job somewhere doing something.
Is there somebody today that you would love to work a program with? Or maybe Rocky?
The Rock,
Right.
Yeah, sure. Any top guy. You can make about $3 million real fast.
There you
sure.
go.
How deep do I have to cut? Book me.
Do you still keep up with everything as far as the TV shows You watch WWF, WCW?
A little bit. I'm still a junkie. Still a wrestling fan.
Right.
After 50 years, 40-something years of watching from the old Chicago wrestling to Monday Night Raw and stuff and WrestleMania stuff today.
You also said that you worked in New Zealand, and I kind of skipped over
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Who was in the territory at the time?
I was down there with. That was great. I left. I was one of the times. It was the first time after I left San Francisco when I tore my shoulder. They called me and they Mark Lewin and Curtis Iaukea were doing the booking. Mark was a babyface. Curtis was the top heel. So they work in. Steve Ricard was actually the promoter. But they were all three promoters. It was like a good cop, bad cop. Mark would be the prick, and Curtis would be the good guy, and
right.
you go in. And they were like the mainstream of the wrestling, and they bring the babyface would come in, I'd come in, I'd take the belt away, but Lewin would always be around, and then when I left and I dropped the belt back to Curtis or one of the heels, then Rick Martel followed me in, and then Rick Martel got the belt, and they worked it like that. But it was always a good. New Zealand had 3 million people and still has 3 million people, and there were at the time there was Channel 1 and Channel 2,
right,
in the whole country, and we have about a 1.2 viewing audience on Sunday afternoons. So over 33% of the country were watching our television show, and it wasn't much because they had a lot of the local New Zealand guys working, and some of the most terrible talent. Steve Aoki had just broken in then.
Right.
He was around. Steve Aoki, Samoa Joe, Red Wolf. Other guys in there. That was insane place because always working for Lewin and Curtis was always it was like Barnett,
right.
The same Barnett type operation. Champion in the work, and you're out of the country. You're in a foreign. So they always made sure they kept the guys happy all the time.
Right.
So we were in a country like New Zealand where they pull the sidewalks in at 6 o'clock at night. But yeah, we were out every night till 2, 3, 4 o'clock. And, there's always something going on. We always had something first happening, and always something going. It was a good time.
Are you surprised at how open the business today is?
Yeah, sure. Well, got to be. I came in 30 years ago when. First night I was in the locker room going to work, and they're still kayfabing me,
Right.
And everybody was, all the fights I've gotten into of people going wrestling's fake. And then people, but they don't realize it's not really fake.
People are really getting hurt.
The people, the moves, the acrobats and people, is it choreographed? Well, not in the sense that you choreograph a Broadway play or something, where guys are just exchanging ideas and they're creating them on the fly.
Right.
I don't know about like I just saw the last WrestleMania where the Big Dudley went through the 4 tables
right.
from the top of the.
Ladder.
I mean,
right.
that stuff is unbelievable.
Right.
Even I went wow during that match, and the other guy doing the flip under the table and the guy outside, just all the amount of that stuff is so crazy. Just blew me away,
Where would Don Muraco fit in today's wrestling?
All right up there, a young Don Muraco.
Right.
Yeah, he'd have to be young. This version probably be a manager or something. But I always felt I could go with anybody. And pretty much proved it. I worked with Jack Briscoe, Dory Funk Jr., they were champs, Terry Funk, the Vern Gagne, Nick Bockwinkel, they were champs, Bob Backlund, Bruno Sammartino, every Harley Race, everybody in between,
Do you have any regrets?
I didn't save enough money, maybe. Nah, not really. Everything, I'm sure there's a lot of things you need to go back over your life. A lot of decisions you made, you would have taken the other path, the other road. But, for general, it was a great life.
At what point in your career did you say, wow, I made it? This is what, I set out to do and I did it?
Oh God, I guess Madison Square Garden would have to be it. First night, Martel or not, with or without the champion, would have to be Madison Square Garden to everybody. And then just being, such a fixture there like I was for so many years. At one time I did the interview, I think it was for the Texas Death Match with Backlund. After an hour and stuff, I'd walk the streets, and so I actually did walk from the hotel all the way to the thing, and then like the Pied Piper, this big mob just following me down the street. It was insane. A lot of things. There was a lot of portions, but that, I guess, bunch of you hit the Garden.
Right.
I had big crowds and stuff before, and worked in front of big shows. But being in New York,
It was the Mecca.
Yeah.
If I go ahead and list a lot of people's names, if you could just give maybe a comment, maybe a sentence.
Sure.
All right. Vince McMahon Jr.
So driven, maniacal, driven, ego. Wants to be the best, wants to have the best. Innovator, creator. What runs through his mind, I'll never understand, because I don't have that type of,
Right.
You got to be that Fortune 500 type of driven person in Wall Street, 24-hour-a-day kind of guy. I like to break down and go surfing and take
a break,
kick back and get away from it a while, where he just drives.
Hulk Hogan.
Rich man. Never the greatest worker, never the greatest talker, never the greatest performer, but during my era, he was the greatest. It was just, you see your name opposite Hulk, you go, payday.
Right.
It's just, he had what it took, He, like I say, wasn't the greatest worker, was more than an adequate talker, especially when those long 5-6 minute speeches that he does, But when you put everything together for my era, my time, up until 1990, 93, 95, he was the man.
Jimmy Snuka.
He was the man. He was, true professional. I owe a lot of my career to him. I'll never forget him. I'll always be linked to him.
Stan Hansen.
Nice guy, great guy. Beat the hell out of you when you work with.
Right.
Just beat you to death. But I'll never hurt you. Never hurt you. Always safe. Always taking care of you. Good worker. Good hard worker.
Ivan Putski.
I had matches with him. I was able to have matches. I know a lot of guys didn't care for him, didn't have to, but he came up with that gimmick. You'd have to work that gimmick. So like I said, I never really had a lot of problems with anybody.
Greg Valentine.
Hard worker, came in the shadow of his dad, tried to follow the same type, but wrestling had changed since then. But nevertheless, was able to work that style and work it and get it over. Was a tremendously hard worker.
Jake the Snake Roberts.
Great amount of talent there. Good mind, good interviewer, good performer in the ring. We all know his problems.
Right. Andre the Giant.
He was a great guy. When I first met him, he was just a terrific guy. And then as the years got on him, I think being a giant just kind of wore him down. I used to watch him destroy hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars worth of cameras walking through the crowd in Japan. Right. They just swatted me, boom, boom, boom. You'd see cameras and videos and everything flying all over the place. He got better, but to me he was always a prince. Right. I had great matches. I'd hate when he made me slam him because it just wasn't. I was a good weightlifter, a strong weightlifter and stuff too. Oh, just to pick that monster up, you know. And you didn't say no to Andre.
Right. Randy Savage.
I never worked with Randy that much. Always a nice guy.
Right.
You know, when he first came into New York, I guess he was real tight when him and Liz were around. You know, I guess he used to keep you locked in the room and wouldn't spend money. And then I heard after I left that he'd run up $500-600 bar bills and stuff. And do all kinds of crazy crap.
Is it true that we just did Beefcake last week, and he said that he used to be really paranoid, and he'd lock her in a room and stuff like that?
Yeah. Huh. I don't know if he locked her in the room, but
right.
They'd always reside back to their room. He'd get a couple of beers and just
Right.
He was with Liz too.
Even in the locker room. I was told not at a hotel.
Yeah, but it was a good thing too because he kept her away from
the boys.
Kept her away from the boys and she was good enough. She never involved herself, and she knew the other wives and stuff, but she never involved herself in anybody's personal life or anybody's personal business. They never did that.
Right.
And as soon as they were, what their tactics were behind the scene and everything else never affected me because I was never really directly related to them. But as far as conduct, they always took care of it, but never involved themselves in anybody else's personal life.
The Samoans.
Often
seek it.
They made a hell of an impression when they first came to New York. I don't think they'd ever seen someone,
right,
two big Samoans like that.
Right.
Vicious, and they're a rugged pair.
Corporal Kirshner. He only was there.
Yeah, he was. I used to call him Corporal Punishment because he was stiff, but a good guy. What happened to him?
He worked at FMW for a while.
Oh,
as
Leatherface.
Wow.
Paul Orndorff.
Gentleman, great worker, great conditioning, great discipline for diet, for training, hard worker, tremendous worker in the ring.
Bob, sorry.
Okay.
Bob Orton?
Natural worker. He's another guy like Murdoch, Terry Funk, Dory Jr., just work the shit out of it, outwork anybody. Just get in there and grind it out, amateur wrestling, submission, whatever you want.
And last is Mr. Saito. I didn't even ask you about him.
Mr. Saito.
Because I know you teamed with him as well. In California, I think.
Yeah. And Florida, we were together, and New York, he was up there with Fuji. He was a heel.
Right.
And I was a heel. Saito was always good fun. I used to travel with him and Fuji. One time, Fuji ribbed to go along with it. We went to Cape Cod or somewhere, Boston, where Vince. We bought a bunch of Chinese food and stuff. So we came back, and he still had these cowboy boots with the thing that come off the side there, And Fuji put a lock on it. He came back and he couldn't get the lock. He was pissed off. He had to cut the lock. He goes, "Oh." He says, "Oh, boy, Fuji, why you blaming me? What you blaming me for?" He said, "I know. I remember you do it to me before in San Francisco."
That's great.
Fuji goes, "Oh, I got to remember not to cross double my ribs anymore."
Somebody was telling me that Fuji would want to sleep, so he would give the long directions to Saito, so Saito would drive the long way to the town.
Like
so
8 hours instead of 3 hours.
That was old Baron Leone thing.
All right.
I worked for Baron Leone one time. I came back here from I think I was working for McMahon. In between, I came home and he was running some stuff up around San Francisco. I never met him, He gave me advice. But I just, just to work with him. He did this. But I knew it was going. I picked me up in San Francisco airport, then took me to breakfast. Then we drove somewhere to lunch. Then we drove to the town. I never got to, kept going all, that type of thing.
Right.
We go. Oh yeah, Fuji said we're going to Brooklyn. They were in New Haven. They go all around. Then after the match is over, you get back in the car. No, stupid. Turn here at this light. Boom, they're home. What are you doing? 20 minutes later, they're in the driveway. They couldn't believe it.
That's great. Do you have any questions at all? Good. In closing, do you have anything to say to your fans?
Oh God, it's been a great life. It's was just a great business and a pleasure to be involved with. Met so many interesting and diverse characters and I was fortunate to travel all over the world. I went to Arabia and Africa, and, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, Japan 13 times. I was, around the world about 6 times. It just offered me just a great opportunity and a great life. I don't know, a kid growing up or somebody else can really foresee something like that.
Right.
Because professional wrestling gives you all that, so much freedom, to you're not structured like a football player or a football team, or NBA or NFL or something like that. Yet you are in the spotlight, and you're pretty much more personal, personally involved, and so you get to meet people and to travel and to do a lot of things, a lot of characters and stuff.
So it's been a good ride.
Huh?
So it's been a good ride.
It's been a great ride, yeah.
Cool.
Every once in a while, I was booked earlier this year, so I worked in 2000, and I worked when I was 50 years old. So that's my I made my millennium milestone. So any other bookings out there,
You got a webpage or anything? That you plug or
no. My wife has a website, but I don't do it. I don't dabble too much in there.
Right.
I just check for the surf report in the morning.
Well, definitely thanks for having us out here. It's beautiful here. And,
no problem.
I wanted a reason to come by, and you're it. So
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.